Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to Truthseekers. Tonight, we're having a very special show. This is the UFO report, and we have a very special guest tonight that I have had on my list to come and try to get to be a guest here for quite some time. Thanks to a show listener here, he sort of hooked us up so we can make that a reality tonight. Robert Sheaffer is somebody that I have followed for quite a while. He's an American freelance writer and UFO skeptic. Also, he's a paranormal investigator of unidentified flying objects. He's researched many sightings and written critiques on the hypothesis that UFOs are alien spacecraft. I believe it is important to hear every side of the argument when it comes to the phenomenon of UFOs. In addition to UFOs, his writings cover topics such as Christianity, academic feminism, and scientific theory of evolution and creationism. He is the author of 6 books. Mr. Sheaffer also wrote for Skeptical Inquirer, where he contributed to the regular Psychic Vibrations column from 1977 to 2017. He's written for Fate magazine and Spaceflight, and he was also a founding member with Philip J. Klass and James Oberg of the UFO subcommittee of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, and is a fellow of that organization. He is also a graduate of Northwestern University and a member of Mensa. So without any further ado, let's welcome our guest in here tonight. Welcome, Mr. Robert Sheaffer. Good to have you here, sir.
Thank you, Stephen. It's good to be here.
I have been, you have been on my list to get on the show for quite some time.
Well, I'm not that hard to schedule, I guess. Just let me know. And
yeah, I just never contacted you. So a fellow, a show listener of mine reached out and said, you should have Robert Sheaffer on. And I said, I'd love to. And he gave me your email. Roger. Yeah. So thank you very much to Roger. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know where to begin except to ask, first of all, why were you interested in UFOs at all? And then was there something that made you, after your initial interest in UFOs, go to the skeptical side of things? Or what was the sequence of events like?
Well, it's a little hard to say. I was growing up and it was the Sputnik era and the space race and all that stuff. And so I found all that stuff enormously exciting. And of course, this was also the time of, NICAP. For those who know UFO history, back in the late 50s, early 60s, NICAP was pretty much the only show in town. And Major Kehoe was roaming about and saying how, Air Force is covering up everything and they have proof that saucers are real, saucers are interplanetary. One of these days, any day now, they're going to release, we're going to have disclosure.
And wait, how long ago was that? Because people are still saying that today.
I know. Oh, that goes back even further. I'm talking about like the 60s. I think the first disclosure rumor I heard was, I don't know, I think it was in one of the magazines in 1949. That supposedly the Navy would soon be releasing. The Navy had built saucers. This was, I think, U.S. News and World Report. And, this kind of nonsense has been going on for a long time. Well, but in my case, I read some of the stuff that was obviously, sensational and so on. But as I got a little bit older and maybe a little bit wiser, and I started reading other things, I remember reading Donald Menzel and his books, especially his first book. I think it was just called Flying Saucers. And then
I have that book. Yeah.
Yeah, Menzel was an astronomer, and because when I look at it now, I can see, well, he's oversimplifying and stretching some things, but the general, the basic gist of what he was saying was correct. That we have to look at weather phenomena and birds and everything else before we say, well, this is unexplained, and so it's must be alien. So and then when I lived not that far from. I grew up in. Near O'Hare Field, just outside Chicago. And Northwestern wasn't all that far away. And I'd been there and I'd visited there. And I thought, well, besides being a really fine school, Alan Hynek was there. And he was a famous guy about UFOs. And So I applied, and I got in, and a very fine university and all that.
Wait, so you picked your college just based on the fact that Hynek was there and knew a lot
Well,
about
there may have
UFOs?
been just one factor.
I love it.
Plus, I got some scholarships and so on. So I mean,
Okay.
there's another reason. But and it looked like a very nice place, and it was a very nice place. And I took astronomy classes, and I got to know Hynek, and he was a very fair guy, trying to be very fair to everybody. But I think he was too gullible. People would tell him stories, and he'd kind of go, maybe that story really is true. It sounds sincere. He says he saw a saucer land and an alien get out. Well, yeah, maybe that, or maybe he was drunk, or maybe he's making up a story. I mean, there's a lot of things that might be the case. And I think Hynek didn't really, he trusted too much in people, I think was what his sort of his legacy was, if you think among scientists. He was,
It's easy. Don't you think it's easy to lose your objectivity though? Like sometimes you want to believe,
Yeah, of course, of course. And some of the magazines and so on were calling him the Galileo of UFO studies because he was opening up this new realm that nobody had opened up before of UFO studies, and he would be famous and so on. And so when I saw that, then I realized, Hynek was, in my opinion, a rather gullible man. And so he, and I mean, it wasn't just UFOs. I mean, it was just sort of like the way he'd run the universe, or the observatory there, the Dearborn Observatory, and all people would kind of ask him for favors and whatever, and more often than not, they'd get them, But so I mean, not anything outrageous or anything totally wrong, but it's just sort of like he was. Let's say his reputation was not that of a hard ass, but rather kind of the opposite.
Wow, interesting. And so eventually though you started investigating cases yourself, right? Was that
Yeah,
while you were still
well,
in college and did you
right.
meet
Well,
Hynek while you were in college?
did I what?
Did you meet Hynek while you were in
Did
that
I meet
college?
him? I knew I took
Yeah,
his
yeah, I've
class.
seen
We
pictures. Yeah.
talked a lot. I took several classes from him. We did several. He had, in fact, there was even one. It was called the Student Organized Seminar on UFOs with Hynek that I was able to take. In fact, I didn't find out about this until they had reached a limit of 15 students, whatever the limit was, and I'd heard about it, and I asked Hynek, was there some way, even though it was theoretically it was closed, was there some way I could get in? And he let me in, and he said, yeah, because you have this interest and you probably bring useful perspectives and so on. So he was very fair to people, in my opinion.
Yeah, he seemed like a fair guy, I guess, and he had a genuine interest, and I guess he recognized that you had a genuine interest, so he wanted to
Right,
include you.
right. And of course, at the same time, I was corresponding with Philip J. Klass because he was, the best known UFO skeptic at the time. And I was frankly a bit surprised to see that Hynek was not skeptical or, you know, I see Kel's comment here. Hynek tried to get along with everyone. Yeah.
Not everyone wanted to get along with him.
Stanton Friedman blasted him for being gullible. Well, if Stanton Friedman says you're gullible, then you must really be gullible.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the same time, I was corresponding with Philip J. Klass, and then over the next year or two, I got to meet him once or twice, and I had a chance to. He was living in Washington D.C. I was in the Chicago area, and of course, but he traveled a lot, and so I met him once or twice when he was traveling out to Chicago, and then I had a chance to travel to Washington D.C. once or twice, and visited with him, stayed with him in his apartment, and was all very interesting. He was he was a difficult guy sometimes to deal with over even small things. He might get a bit upset about what I would consider small things, but he he never made stuff up. People say, "Oh, he's a liar, he's a cheat, he's a CIA agent." No, he knew everybody in the government, or not everybody, but a lot of people in the government, because that was his job, right? His job was to, as a journalist at Aviation Week, sometimes known as Aviation Leak. They were the ones that showed first revealed a lot of things like the stealth bombers and a lot of the whatever is new in the aviation world. You're going to read about it in Aviation Week before you read about it anywhere else. And so, yes, he knew everybody.
Unfortunately, you're getting the reveal of these things 20 years after they exist. But
yeah, well, they were doing this
tell us
before.
Eventually.
Yeah, they were. I don't think they were waiting 20 years. In fact, as I understand it, FBI. There's all kinds of FBI pipers nowadays on all kinds of people. And if you look at the FBI files on Philip J. Klass, they actually were considering the possibility of an espionage charge against him, simply because of something he'd written in Aviation Week. And this was back, I don't know, late 50s, maybe early 60s. But then they decided, well, it would, even draw more attention to it if we try to prosecute him. So we'll let it slide and maybe give him a lecture or something like that. But so, yeah.
I know.
If there was a secret, he was in no way was he going to keep it, Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And I know a lot of older, let's call them veteran UFO researchers or authors.
Yeah.
That, boy, if you mention that guy to them, they get upset. He was not.
Yeah,
he was not well liked by UFO guys, right? Because he busted so many cases as fake.
Right. Well, if to the extent that ufology is a religion, which for some people it is, Phil Klass is their Satan.
Oh, that's interesting. It's pretty out there, though, right? They hated him. They really did hate him that much.
Yeah, he's Satan. So I guess I'm in league with Satan, at least in the opinion.
You were corresponding with Satan there, Mr. Sheaffer. Yeah. So you're corresponding with these more Klass, who's much more skeptical. You're taking classes with Hynek, who's much more of a believer. So I guess you got to see both sides of the argument, right?
Oh, yeah. And I got to meet a few other people. Was it Fred Beckman, I think, was one of Hynek's colleagues in the so-called Invisible College. Now, Vallée was not there at Northwestern at the time. He was somewhere else, although he did come back briefly to visit, to give a talk, and I did meet him briefly, but he wasn't there. And interestingly, no, this was back in, 69 or 70, Vallée said, well, when I chatted with him a bit, oh, well, I'm not doing that UFO stuff anymore. I gave up on that. Well, I don't know about that, but...
That's interesting. So there's been times where I said I'm wasting my time here. I'm chasing shadows. I should do something else. But every time I try to jump off, something drags me back in. So, here I am. So after getting to know some of these guys, you started investigating cases yourself and started seriously looking into some cases.
Well, I started, a couple of things. One was this Lucci photo, if you're familiar with the photo. It looks like it's like the full moon, and then there's this object that's kind of nebulous and hanging there, and somewhat oval shaped or something. And this was submitted to NICAP, and the NICAP photo analyst passed it as, oh yeah, this is authentic. These two boys, teenage boys, they said they were out, I don't know, getting pictures of the moon or something, and a UFO came by, and so they got this picture. And this is a famous photo that's on the cover of Incident at Exeter. I think it also was on the cover of the Interrupted Journey. It's a very, very famous, very iconic photo.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it right now.
Klass was of the opinion that this was a genuine plasma UFO. This was his first, entry into it, to see that, well, maybe these people are seeing plasmas, which are supposedly caused.
Oh, I think we may have lost you there. Give it a moment. Maybe we've had a hiccup here.
It would be very easy to fake this. In fact, I did fake my own version of the Lucci photos and sent them to Klass and show him, a relatively easy thing to do with a flashlight and so on. And so he agreed with what I had sent him, and then he wrote in the future that that this was right. That's it. That thing on the interrupted journey. That's one of the Lucci photos. It's only a little piece of it. You're not seeing the whole photo there. It's a plate on somebody's hand like this. Yeah. And I found the fact that it was like if you get one of these ice cream dishes, like from you go to one of these Dairy Queen or something, and they got a plastic ice cream container, and you put that on your hand, that gives you pretty much that.
Interesting. Yeah, and I'm always kind of disappointed at some of these photos that people tout as like evidence, because they're always so grainy and could be anything. It's kind of like
Yeah.
seeing animals in clouds. Do
Yeah,
people just see what
exactly.
they want to see, or what? Because this is terrible to me.
And in fact, it is now a confessed hoax. Sometime I think much later, like in the '90s, one of the two brothers, maybe it was the one who took this photo, because the two boys were out there together doing this. One of them said, "Oh yeah, we hoaxed it." He admitted it really was like a plate on somebody's hand. So, so
That's a
there's no
big.
doubt about that now, but it's still considered to be a classic, iconic photo.
Yeah, interesting. And Heineck thought it was a plasma UFO. Is that what you
No, no,
said?
no. Class thought it was a plasma
Oh,
UFO.
plasma UFO.
Hynek, I'm not sure if he said anything about this one. He might have tentatively accepted it. I'm not really sure. And I also started to look into the Trent UFOs. Um, the famous pair of from 1950 of UFOs over a garage and an oil tank. This was one that the Condon report, William Hartman of the Condon report, had said might be all aspects were consistent with it being a large object at a distance, based on certain densitometric readings and comparisons of the brightness of the sky and the brightness of the bottom of the tank, and so on and so on. And I showed that there was another explanation of this, which is yeah, exactly, that's right. And it's what photographers call veiling glare. It's when you get your finger on the lens, or uh, petroleum jelly, or whatever happens to be on your lens, peanut butter. It will essentially will have that effect. It will scatter light from nearby bright areas to darker areas, not simply because of optical imperfection. And it turns out that that's one possible explanation, but um, more recently, and I have this on my blog, if you go to the Bad UFOs blog, there was a fellow named Joel Carpenter who really dug into this and did very well. He died, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. But on and He showed that basically what we see, the Trent photo most likely is a truck mirror, like from a 1930s truck, one of these old trucks with the hanging from the overhead wires, because you can't see it in all these versions of it, but it's the wires. Yeah, there you go. There's the overhead wires. You can see that. Most of these usually are cropped in such a way that you cannot see the overhead wires, but in both photos you can see the overhead wires, and it's hanging from some sort of a you know fishing wire or something.
Yeah, and very convenient that they cut the wires.
Yeah,
They crop the
yeah, they
wires that
crop
are
it
right
out,
above the
to
object
make you see
out
it.
to make it more
Yeah.
believable. Yeah.
The reason that a truck mirror changes the photometric completely is because it's silvered. It's not a. The assumption of Hartman and the Condit report was that the underside of the object was was dark and was unilluminated. But actually, if that is simply reflecting the ground, you know, because it's a mirror. It's showing is reflecting the ground below it, which is in the sunlight. So that you have to assume it's in shadow. And if it's not in shadow, if it's a mirror image of something in sunlight, then that throws off all the numbers, and basically you can't prove anything about its distance. So it's just a small object. The other thing Joel Carpenter found out was the photographer basically crouched down very low to the ground to get those photos. I mean, if I'm going to see a UFO and I got my camera in my hand, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to go, take pictures like this. That's not what he did. He got as close to the ground as he could. The camera looked up. So clearly, he's taking something that's very small and trying to make it look big. So if you go to my Bad UFOs blog and you just just look up Trent Photo or McMinnville, Trent, TRENT, Trent Photo, and you'll see I have a lot of this. Also, somebody did a 3D, somebody who has the software, uses the software to, create 3D images from two different photos, has put those two Trent photos together, and it's not perfect, but it's reasonably good. And you can see that it's a small object. It's much closer to the camera.
I found the article on your blog.
There you go. Yeah.
Special report: the Trent UFO photos, the best of all time, finally busted.
Right. You can see the overhead wires, and there's a lot of writing there, but there you go.
Shadows by bright cloud in the afternoon, shadow on the east wall at sunset.
Yeah.
Oh, and look, there's the truck mirror. There's the truck. I've never seen this before. This is great. Yeah, it looks pretty similar to that object, doesn't it?
Pretty damn similar. Same thing, really.
Same exact thing.
Take it off of its mount, and it'd be the same thing.
And the guy who took Joel Carpenter had that truck mirror on his truck?
No, Joel Carpenter is the guy who analyzed it. No,
the analyzer. I'm sorry.
The guy. Yeah. So Paul Trent, presumably he had I mean, these old mirrors would be anywhere. You go to a junkyard, and you'd find it. Oh, there you go. Somebody did that as a stereo pair. So if you have like a stereo viewer, you can see the thing, or you can even kind of see it without the viewer, but it's a little better with it. But
yeah, very interesting analysis, and cool to see the truck mirror that looks exactly like the object in the picture.
Exactly.
Adamski used a piece or top of a Coleman lantern for his UFO.
That was Carpenter also who found that out. People were saying
that's what I'm aware of. Yeah.
Yeah. People were saying that it was a chicken brooder, and I don't know anything about chicken brooders, but that was another one of Joel Carpenter's analyses, was that this thing looks exactly like the Coleman lantern that was being sold at the time, the top of the Coleman lantern.
Yeah. Yeah, and that would explain the portholes and things, because there's holes in those Coleman lanterns around the sides of them to let the light out and let the heat out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting analysis on that one. And that's one of those that have persisted as people always, I have seen people put that picture in presentations all the time. And they may not be talking it up as genuine, but if it's in your presentation, it's easy to assume they believe the photo is genuine.
Unless they say, look at this, it's fake. But that's not what they're saying. They're saying, oh, here's another UFO and another one.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, and just to be clear, this article that we've just shared is only one article. You've got hundreds of articles on all different things on your blog here. Right?
Oh, yeah. All kinds of them. Just look up, it's got the search box there, and if there's a case you want to hear about, just type it in there, see if I've got it. If it's a major case, there's a good chance it's in there.
And most recently, you've been writing about this Galileo project and Tom DeLonge's To the Stars, because he has brought on, I want to ask your opinion of this. They brought on Chris Mellon, and they hired Chris Mellon and also Lou Elizondo, I suppose, to be consultants of some kind.
Yeah, to be consultants for the, because of their expertise in UAPs or UFOs or whatever you want to call it. But, this whole thing is really kind of, it's funny. Before that, I wrote another piece about the Galileo project, which I've given my commentary. Now, I'm not against the notion that somebody might try to look for possible alien anything, whether it's in our solar system or elsewhere, if they're willing to accept the idea that their likelihood of success is, 0.0, a whole long string of zeros and maybe a one out there somewhere. But if somebody wants to do it, that's fine. But what I don't understand is why these guys with the Galileo project at Harvard think that they're somehow going to do something different than what's been done before. They say, well, we're going to get telescopes, we're going to look at stuff, we're going to look at radars, use radar to find what's in orbit around. Because they've already got these space, what do they call them? Space surveillance radars that are finding objects that are even smaller than they claim to be looking for. And
yeah, someone suggested that they just wanted some new telescopes, these guys. I heard somebody suggest that.
I'm not even sure what, of any kind of, I'm not even sure what proposal they have that would really make their telescopes any different than those we already have. And maybe they say, well, they want to use them in different ways or something, or look at different objects. But, it's not like I say, we can build new telescopes. We're going to look through new telescopes. Well, okay. And they're going to set up cameras. We're going to go in areas where there's UFOs and set up cameras. We're going to record them and find out what they are. Do you know how many people have tried to do that? Yeah, I've got that in there. Just search for Galileo in my blog, and you'll find those two.
I'll see if I can't find those while we're talking. Sure.
Yeah, because all these different people have proposed or actually started and mounted cameras. They seem to think, well, if we see a lot of UFOs around a certain town, we'll just put our cameras up there and we'll catch the UFOs. And of course, it's never.
Yeah, and here's the article. Some thoughts on the new Galileo project.
Right. And then all the other projects here, you can see that's another one of these camera projects. And then there's another one down there. And, it gives all the details on these, and people have got all kinds of cameras out there. I just don't, Galileo project, yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was a lot more excited about it before they brought Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon on. Because,
it suggests they don't really know what they're doing.
Nobody's ever explained to me, and, I say this all the time, the UFO community is a big club, and I ain't in it. So, Chris Mellon won't come here and be interviewed, and neither will Lou Elizondo, despite his claims that he'll let anyone interview him and he'll come on any show. Somebody needs to ask both those guys what happened to the millions of dollars that TTSA collected. What did the investors get for it? And after all, while they were members of that organization, TTSA promised everybody that they were going to build a spaceship with a revolutionary power source that was going to change the world. And so far, all they did was publish a couple of books and make a TV show. But they didn't
make two seasons of a TV show. So maybe that's just as good as build. No, you're absolutely right. They said we're going to build a spaceship using all this advanced ufological technology that will get us literally to the stars. And I guess that didn't happen.
No, but all the money's gone.
Well, and I have another article where somebody said I think it was even in one of their filings that they had a debit of $37 million or some such thing. And then Tom DeLonge said, oh, no, well, that's just an accounting artifact. It doesn't really mean anything because we're just basing that on the hypothetical value of shares and hypothetical this and that. And so I don't know if that was ever,
and then
really happened.
I love that.
I have another, there was a guy, I'm trying to remember the name of the guy who was their accountant. And
he's a very creative guy.
Yeah. And he had an office over in near La Jolla, in San Diego County. And there was a question about the whether they had this a couple of different companies, and he had one. Tom DeLonge had a company called R2 Dogs, and some people were saying, and then if you look at the actual filing of R2 Dogs, it says what's your product line? It says hot dogs, okay, and but who runs it? Well, it's Tom DeLonge. So then somehow R2 Dog somehow To the Stars had to give money to R2 Dogs. A number of us were trying to figure out what the hell's going on here. So I actually went to this guy's office and just tried to interview him and said, could you explain to me, please, about what the R2 Dogs are? And And he said, "Oh well, it's not. It, it was just a shell corporation or some such thing." And
I'm aware of somebody
he really
went to
didn't
one of
want
the
to. He didn't want to
one of
talk
the
about it.
yeah, and somebody went to one of the addresses in the TTSA filings and found out that it was a hot dog cart.
Well, I
Like
didn't
they
see
used the
that.
address from a hot dog cart in their
Oh, I would love to
filings.
see that because yeah,
Yeah.
it said our two dogs. But that, and then I had the. I'm trying to remember what was the name of the business thing that Dun and Bradstreet. I think and so if you look on Dun and Bradstreet's um, for our two dogs, it says yeah, what's the business? Or in their business is hot dogs. And then I went in to talk to the company. Oh, you can't believe it, Dun and Bradstreet. That's a lot of nonsense. Yeah, right. Oh, really? I don't believe the Wall Street Journal either, or Barron's, or any of those other publications, because they're all made up too, right? So,
So the guy just gave you excuses for why
yeah, no, he didn't
TTSA
want to
was
talk.
giving
He
them
said he
money.
didn't want
He
to
didn't
talk.
want to talk
Somebody else
about it.
talk to my lawyer. Talk to Tom DeLonge's lawyer. So, yeah, I tried. Tried to get some straight answers, but
Well,
of
a
course,
lot of
there's no
people have
straight answers
suggested,
about that.
yeah, and a lot of people have suggested that a lot of that money that was collected went to pay Tom DeLonge's debts down because he sort of folded a hot dog company, a T-shirt company, I believe. I'm speaking from memory, so if I'm misspeaking,
Yeah.
I apologize. But he folded a lot of his like failing companies' debts into TTSA. And I don't know. I looked at some of the financial paperwork and I don't understand where all the money went. And he was paying his sister $100,000 a year for God knows what.
Yeah.
We don't know where any of the money went. So
Yeah.
when people have Chris Mellon or Lou Elizondo and they're giving them more money, I feel like first they have to explain what happened to the millions that they already collected with TTSA. Where's the spaceship? And then, maybe you could talk about the money that they're making now, or collecting now. Book deals, TV deals, and Lou Elizondo is an interesting character. Every once in a while, he drops some incredible claim, but has never provided any proof. Like he recently he said that the government is in possession of alien biological samples. But then when pressed for proof, he starts talking about NDAs and his,
yeah,
his
it's all secret.
pool.
I can't tell you about it. I just told you about it, but I can't tell you about it.
It's so secret. I can't tell you about it, but I just did. It doesn't make any sense. If that was covered under his NDAs or his clearance, he wouldn't say the government has biological samples. He wouldn't be able to talk about it at all, right?
That's right.
I would think. Well, I don't know. I'm no expert here.
Yeah. Well, in the past, I have held security clearances when I worked on software projects, and you're right. You just can't talk about it at all.
Yeah, and he and his sister had almost all the stock. Cal Corf is chiming in. Cal Corf
well, maybe so,
has done a lot of research into that, right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. And so, I guess it's interesting that your blog covers old historical cases, but you're also up to date on some of the latest happenings and in the crazy conspiracy world of UFOs here, right?
Well, I try to, and I mean, I try to stay on top of all the crazy stuff that's happening. And Cal Garfie's always got something funny to say.
Yeah, Lou Elizondo is not only a remote viewer, he says Roswell's real, so
that's right.
He's now blown his left nut off. I don't know what.
Yeah, in fact, he said Roswell was not one crash; it was two crashes that occurred.
Well, a lot of people believe that there was a debris field crash, and then there was a secondary crash where the bodies were, if you believe the literature that's out there.
Yeah.
And, we did a whole series on Roswell, and I'm still on the fence because there's just a lot of things that don't make sense about Roswell. And the government's, they're on their third story explaining what really happened now.
Well, I don't think you can pay too much attention to those. A lot of, especially if you look at all those people that have it's funny. I stop and I read what the.
You're reading the live chat, yeah.
Yeah, and then I think, we got to talk about that. And if you look at the people who are doing the so-called UAP task force for the Pentagon now, and they don't even recognize out of focus images when they see them. They don't even understand about parallax, the so-called go fast video. Go fast UFO is not going fast. It's going very slowly. It's almost standing still. But the plane is moving at like 400 miles an hour. So if it's moving at 400 miles an hour and this is standing still, you're in a plane, you're going to see this thing moving behind you at a great rate of speed. But good Lord, I mean, how dumb do you have to be to not realize this? But that's that's an example of government analysts, good enough for government work.
That's great actually. Yeah. And I got to tell you one other thing about your blog that's pretty funny, because you have an article about Travis Walton and his girlfriend's baby getting abducted by aliens, right? And it was from a question from Theories of Everything. I saw it here,
right?
And I read your blog, and it's so funny. I go on your blog around this time, a little after you posted this, and I just cracked up. Do you know why?
Why?
I'm the guy who sent Kurt all that information about Travis's second abduction with his girlfriend and the baby being, I don't know, beamed out of her stomach or stolen by the aliens. So I almost fell off my chair because I said, oh my God, the question that I sent into Kurt is in bad UFOs. And that was cool. So it was a cool thing to say.
I'm really glad you sent that in, because that was,
Yeah, Kurt's a good guy, and he realizes that there are some people out there that know, a lot of the minutia that he may be missing. So he relies on me sometimes to give him some of the dirt on some of these guys in interviews.
Well, that's good.
And I send in some questions. I got to ask Lou a question, and I asked, why doesn't he just show his tax returns to prove the level of pay and the pay grade that he was getting and the leadership role that he had in this program? And he didn't like that question one bit. And I've been attacked viciously, people saying showing his tax returns wouldn't prove anything. But to me, yes, it would. It would prove his level of pay, which would prove his level of leadership or his level of non-leadership, but he won't release those tax returns.
If you've lived in the D.C. area, that everybody says, oh, I'm a GS this and a GS that. I'm a GS 9, I'm a GS 11, I'm a GS 13.
He was supposed to be a GS 15, I believe, as I recall.
I think so, yeah. I don't know what he would be, but the point is, the tax returns, all that they would prove was that he was a GS 15 or 14 or whatever he claimed.
I'd like him to prove at least that much. He hasn't yet.
Yeah, well, that would be. But then if you noticed, and I quoted this in the latest blog posting, James Lukatsky, who was the head of AAWSAP. All this stuff about Pentagon UFO programs. They say, there you go, AATIP, that's supposedly Elizondo headed up, then AAWSAP, and so on. If you look at what James Lukatsky said, he was on the Coast to Coast show with George Knapp recently. And what he said was, well, he had, talk about Elizondo, he had his program and I had mine. My program had $22 million budget, which we know about, and the money went to Bigelow for his, his contract for his people to write about weird science. He said, my program had $22 million budget. His program had zero. AATIP had zero funding.
Now, so how do you run a whole program? Yeah, how do you run a whole program? Zero funding. You know what else is very suspect? Suspect? There's not one piece of paperwork, not one report that we can look at that Elizondo did, not one, briefing document he gave to superiors. They even deleted all of his emails, and he, I believe, is trying to turn that into some conspiracy.
Yeah,
I've been in touch with somebody. I've been in touch with somebody at the Pentagon who's in IT, and I'm a computer science guy. So, I have a lot of friends. One of them is in the Pentagon, and he works in IT, and he told me they would never have deleted all of his emails if there was anything of governmental importance or Defense Department importance in his emails.
Yeah.
If they deleted all his emails, it was because there was nothing of any importance in all of his emails, which is another suspicious thing. Why?
Well,
why is there,
about the deleted emails, John Greenewald on the Black Vault, he went through this a couple of weeks or a couple of months ago, And he said, well, when it was first reported, he said, oh, it's very strange. These emails are missing, and it's perhaps, possibilities they're trying to hide his employment or what he said or something like that, because they would have to go through all these steps to delete. And since they didn't go through the steps, therefore, there was no legitimate reason. Then and I said, I still think it's more likely that it, is simply, very simply, that somebody screwed up in the process, and it had nothing to do with Elizondo. It probably had to do with a lot of different people, and the process screwed up. And so then he, I guess a while later, then there was something released by the Pentagon that said, "Oh, we've screwed up on a bunch of these." So basically, kind of validated what I was saying, that this was not anything specific to Elizondo. This was a case of some department manager or some department somehow not following procedures. So I don't really think it was anything too, anything too much about that.
No big conspiracy. I mean, it would make sense that there was nothing of importance there. Because if there was anything of national security or Defense Department importance there, they don't delete the emails. They keep them for record's sake, for reference sake.
Right.
I'd like to see one report of him actually doing any kind of UFO investigation. Turns out he never did, near as I can tell, he never did a single field investigation. Near as I can tell, he never interviewed anybody. In fact, this Alex Dietrich, who was a direct witness to the Tic Tac video event, he didn't even meet her or talk to her until he had already resigned from the program. If she was a direct witness and he was investigating, if she was a direct witness and he was investigating, wouldn't it make sense that he interview her about the event? Apparently he never did.
Here's what we know, at least I think we know, is that there is no evidence that AATIP or Elizondo ever did any investigation of any case. There's not a single piece of paper. There's not a single, no evidence of any kind to tell us that this was something that actually happened, that they actually were doing anything. Who knows? They may have been looking at it and coming to their own conclusions. But, as far as you think an investigation, you write his notes, I write notes, you write notes, I'm sure. But, as far as there's nothing. And in fact, getting back to the Black Vault, John Greenwald, he just recently published.
That was a great story.
There was no, he made a Freedom of Information request for a project goals or project budget, project statement, or anything.
And there was
having
nothing.
To do with AAWSB and AATIP. Neither one of them had any project statement, any project goals. This is insane. So if you've got all these a project, it's you're using
and I'd like to know, as a taxpayer, I'd like to know what we got for our $22 million. What did they do with
38 papers. We know exactly what we got. We got 38 papers on weird science. And if you go into the search box, type in 38 papers, you'll find the link to show exactly where this is. And it's weird stuff. It's written by Eric Davis and Harold Putoff and all these various people. And it's anti-gravity and, all this kind of stuff. And it's nothing that is in any sense useful or practical as far as I can see.
Yeah, it's just kind of ridiculous that $22 million got spent. And these guys
got funneled over to Bigelow somehow, because remember Harry Reid,
sweetheart deal,
was the head of the Senate at the time.
Right?
He was, and he was a Democrat leader in the Senate. And then Bigelow was a large, major campaign contributor to him. And so he persuaded Bigelow to persuade a couple of his buddies to then create this AAWSAP with a budget of $22 million. And the sole bidder was Bigelow Aerospace or Advanced Aerospace or whatever nonsense. And then he just gave it to the people to write these papers, which works out to something like $300,000 a paper, approximately. Now, I could write you a really fine paper for $300,000.
Yeah, let's sign up, Mr. Sheaffer. I want to write a paper, too. I write about remote viewing or something.
Yeah, remote viewing. That'll be a real good one. Yeah. Oh,
well,
that's Bob
one
Steiner
of the
and Eric Geller. Yeah.
Eric Davis is an interesting character, and so many people think that he really knows the truth about where the bodies are and all this. Like he's claiming that he briefed people, senators, about the alien crash retrievals and the off-world vehicles.
Right. He's claiming a lot of
and I
things.
say,
Yeah.
show me one senator
exactly.
that sat in on a briefing. Show me one, because he does the same dance. When people call him on his BS, he says, well, I have security clearances and I can't. Well, then how did you tell us you were running classified briefings about aliens, bro? It doesn't make any sense. And Davis has been called, I found an article, well, actually, a listener of mine, Victor Colliero, a great UFO researcher, he sent me in the late 80s. Eric Davis got paid tens of thousands of dollars to write a paper on warp drive and stargates. And there's like pictures of Barney, the kid's dinosaur, and Einstein like waving at a dinosaur through a stargate. and he charged the Air Force like tens of thousands of dollars. Then there was newspaper articles where the Air Force representatives said that what he did was crackpot science, not real science. But somehow he's supposed to be a credible guy, right? And
yeah, well, he has a degree. What he's
an adjunct professor,
astrophysicist or something like that. Yeah, well, he was a guy who's talking about poltergeist, right? He said that a poltergeist followed him back from
Skinwalker,
from the Skinwalker Ranch at home, I guess. I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, and Eric Davis just said that John from the Black Vault had dick and mouth disease.
Yeah. I wonder what he'll say about me.
Yeah, I'm about to get dick and mouth disease because I keep on saying that guy's. I'm sorry, he's a crackpot. He's written a whole bunch of wackadoo theories, nothing like real. He can't ever prove any of the statements he made. He's responsible for this Wilson Davis notes that are, going around, and Richard Dolan swears they're real based on 12 anonymous sources that nobody else is allowed to interview.
Yeah, exactly.
And the admiral said that they were a work of fiction, but that doesn't stop UFO profiteers like Richard Dolan from running around selling them, right?
Right.
Call it the UFO leak of the century.
Dolan or your own eyes, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and Davis said Roswell really happened. Hey, for all I know, it did, but it doesn't.
Yeah,
just because
not necessarily in the way that that it actually did. No, it's amazing.
Yeah, somebody mentioned cash cow, and it seems to me that people like Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis have been on the taking money from people to do what it can only be called crackpot research. Hal Puthoff, his boss, declared, we could get into Amazing Randy. Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis' boss, once declared Uri Geller a real and genuine psychic with real superpowers.
Absolutely.
And what people don't know is that besides the Amazing Randy busting him for being a fraud using magic tricks, recently, I don't know if you even know this, Mr. Sheaffer, Uri Geller recently admitted at a conference of magicians that he used all kinds of magic tricks, and then he started selling books and DVDs to magicians on how to do his tricks. So Hal Puthoff said he had real superpowers. Turns out he was using magic tricks the whole time.
Those are
he spent millions.
He can't reveal it.
Yeah, he spent millions.
He can't reveal it to the public. He can just.
Thanks to Lee Guy for $1.99 super chat. Very kind and generous of you. He says wackadoo. Yes, there's a money button down there. If you want to throw money at me, that would be very helpful. We're a viewer-supported show. We read every super chat. Please do that. There's a money button down there in the chat. You can send as little or as much as you want. Somebody please send me $22 million in a super chat because I want to write some papers. I'll write more than 38, I promise. Yeah, so tell us about your association with the Amazing Randy, who, for those that don't know, was a magician and skeptic who busted faith healers, fake psychics, and more, right?
Yeah. Well, when I first started to get involved with PsyCop and with the skeptics, the organized skeptics groups, I no longer am a member of PsyCop. I formerly was a fellow of PsyCop for almost 40 years. I wrote the Skeptical Inquirer, the column Psychic Vibrations, but they started getting far away from the ideals of skepticism. It started a bit even back in the 80s and the 90s, and by now they're, it's sort of like, there's this narrative, question it. If Dr. Fauci says this or Michael Mann says that, it's absolute truth, and if you question it, well, you're a conspiracy nut, and so on. PsyCop didn't used to be like that. The people who originally were the founders, I mean, they were a very diverse group, and in terms of what they thought and what they believed, there was no political element to it. We'd get together and we'd talk about, Uri Geller, we talk about astrology, we talk about UFOs, this kind of thing. Now they get together and they talk about whether they have enough blacks here and enough women there, and oh well. So, but yeah, he was a great guy, and he was a very independent thinker. He didn't necessarily, follow any party line or anything like that, and but he understood, because he was a good magician, he understood the tricks that Geller was doing, and he wanted to make sure that people understood this and people saw this. And so he, because at that time, yeah, Uri Geller was a big deal. And of course, the two scientists who were investigating Geller were Targ and Puthoff, Russ Targ and Harold Puthoff. Puthoff, of course, is now working with and has been working with Bigelow for decades. Puthoff has his own research group, forget what he calls it, down in Austin. Yeah, there's the movie An Honest Liar. I recommend people see that if they can. It's very interesting.
Yeah, great documentary. And I think, I got the chance to meet him a few times at the home of Gary Darwin, a magician who's since passed away, who had a museum of magic in Las Vegas. And he was very, very kind to me, and gave me a lot of advice.
Oh yeah, he was there. Everybody almost universally reports it. If you've had a chance to meet Randy, it was great. And
I went to this gathering just because Gary Darwin mentioned to me in passing, oh yeah, Amazing Randy, James Randy's in town and he's going to be at our get together tonight. And I didn't know this man Gary Darwin very well, but I'm like, can I come, please? Just because I wanted to meet Randy, and I got to, and that was really interesting. And we talked a lot about Uri Geller, and boy, Uri Geller sued him and harassed him, and for years they had this. Yeah. And then, to tell you what kind of a guy Uri Geller is, when Amazing Randy passed away, when James Randy passed away, Uri Geller basically said, "Good, I hope he burns in hell." That's what he said when the man died, Uri Geller. Really? Such a spiritual psychic, right?
Well, there you go. Very, very psychic, yeah.
Yeah. But he did a lot to inform people about these fraudsters that are out there, especially faith healers and mediums.
Yeah, faith healers and the psychic surgeons and so on. There was that whole thing where Randy organized people to go after, what was the psychic? What was the name of the psychic, the so-called faith healer who was such a big guy? And
Puthoff, or no, not Puthoff.
No.
Peter Poppet.
Yeah, right. Peter Popoff. That's right. Peter
Popoff. That's his name. Yeah.
He was Randy, and actually it was the Bay Area skeptics who did a lot of that. Put it together. Bob Steiner. He called me several times, talked about that, and invited me to join in the day-to-day of it. But I was working a whole lot of hours at that time, and I wasn't in any situation to do so. But it was several of the Bay Area skeptics. It was all people that I know that went there and did this and got the goods on Peter Popoff, and the fellow Don Henvick, who did the acting of several roles and got phony healing from Peter Popoff once in drag. He was also a Bay Area skeptic, and
I did it in drag.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, one of the last one, he was healed of several things, and the last one, he was healed of ovarian cancer by Peter Popoff.
Without ovaries, that's a good trick, right?
Right. Well,
and for those that don't know, for those that don't know, what Randy figured out is that Popoff was having people fill out prayer cards, and they would put whatever was ailing them, like if they had heart problems, cancer, diabetes, on the prayer cards. And then he had an earpiece, and his wife was backstage reading the prayer cards, but Popoff, would make it appear as if God was telling him, "Oh, Robert Sheaffer, please stand up. Oh, I know you have a problem with cancer of the esophagus or whatever." And everybody would go, "Wow, like, how does he know that?"
God told him.
His wife was backstage.
Yeah, he had a little earplug.
Yeah, he had a little earpiece, and Randy got a frequency. He got a radio set that could pick up any frequency. They found the frequency, and they recorded his wife feeding him all the lines. It was beautiful.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, we got a guy who was an expert in electronic surveillance to come in and do this to help us with it, and he was very good. Now this guy, Blinking Liar, says that Randy was never going to part with $1 million. He doesn't seem to understand how this was done. It was done as a challenge. And,
it's $1 million challenge.
You would agree. Both sides would agree. Randy would say, "Well, what do you do?" And he'd say, "Well, I read cards or something like that." And you say, what percentage can you get right? "Oh, I get 80% right." "Okay, well, let's have a test then. And if you get more than 50% right, if chance is with the ESP cards, chance level is say 20% right, and if you get 50% right or more, you win." And they would both agree to this. And then if the test was held, which sometimes it wasn't, but usually it was, and of course they couldn't do it. They may have thought they could do it, but everything was agreed to in advance. Can you really read this, or can you read that, or something? "Oh, yes, I can do it." "Well, okay, let's set up a test." "Can you really find water?" "All right, let's set up a test."
One of my favorites was the guy.
Randy would never pay. Well, he'd have to pay if
the guy did it. Yeah, one of my favorites
the check was in somebody else's hands. The judges would hold it.
It was in trust.
And if the judges said yes, you pass, then the guy gets the check.
Yeah, and what was interesting to me? One of the most interesting one was the guy who was claiming that he was like turning the pages of a phone book with his mind.
Oh yeah,
but it turned out that
his name.
Yeah, it turned out he was just blowing on the paper to get it to go. And so Randy put a bunch of styrofoam all around the book and said, "Do it again." And the guy couldn't do it.
Yeah, because the styrofoam would go all over and you'd see that he was blowing on it. So
Yeah, under laboratory conditions, most of these guys fail miserably. And Randy also famously busted Uri Geller. Uri Geller was going on Johnny Carson's show. And Johnny Carson, former magician, got with Randy to devise some tests for Mr. Geller, and he failed miserably on national television. But interestingly, it only made him more popular. It didn't kill his career, which is interesting, right?
Well, that tells you any publicity is good publicity, right?
Yeah, it's amazing that guy. He's still trying today. He said he was going to stop Brexit over in England with his psychic powers, and that didn't work out well for him. And a bunch of other stuff,
Yeah, then he was going to do something in the other direction, I forget, and help out the other, help out the right wing, and then that didn't work either, so I don't know what he's going to do.
Yeah, I just found it interesting, too, that people were so willing to believe Uri Geller, even after it came out that he was a stage magician before he was a psychic. If you were a stage magician, it's kind of like, well, maybe you're using tricks, right? But people still, they wanted so much to believe. He used chants too. Like he would say he's going to start people's broken watches over the radio, and people would report that he did. But I don't know what the source of that was. Or why
a lot of these old watches, especially not the kind with batteries, the old wind-up watches, they would stop, or they'd get a little bit of gum in the mechanism, and you'd pick them up and shake them, and they'd they'd run for a short time, and then they'd stop again. And that's basically, I think, what a lot of this was happening.
And someone's mentioning Randy was the first to publicly show magic was to explain the bending spoon thing. Yeah, and to this day, that's a trick that many magicians do. I used to do it. I used to have a real cheap, thin spoons that could bend super easily. And there's all kinds of different methods to do that, but mostly misdirection. You distract somebody while you bend the spoon, and then you put it in their hand after they saw it straight. We did a demonstration of that here on the show a long time ago. Yeah, so interesting that you knew Mr. The amazing Randy,
right?
And even got a chance to work with him. Right.
Yeah.
And interesting
and
that
Bob Steiner, by the way, was his accountant. Because Steiner was a CPA accountant. Bob Steiner is another magician. And sometimes Randy would come out to visit Steiner, and we'd all get together, and it was great fun.
Yeah, and don't you think that a magician is a good person to be, like busting frauds and scammers and rip-off
absolutely.
artists?
The very best, because they're familiar with the whole question of error and misperception and deception. And so, I mean, they're the specialists, the experts in that subject. And then I see some of these amateurs in that subject, like, trying to, claim an outstanding or an amazing sighting or something. And it's very easy to show, you could be misled.
In my experience with fake psychics, because we've busted a few here, my favorite was we had a psychic healer here, and she claimed that she could diagnose people's illnesses through their aura, even over the phone. So I sent her a fake terminal cancer patient, and she bought it hook, line, and sinker and told him she was healing his cancer and shrinking his cancer cells and all this stuff. And he didn't have cancer. He wasn't even sick. She's threatening to sue me right now, Mr. Sheaffer, actually, for harassment, because I proved her superpowers weren't real. That's a form of harassment now.
Right.
She asked me to test her powers, and I did, and she failed miserably.
Well, she should be grateful then that you tested her, but no.
Yeah, some of these people really bother me, though, because in that girl's case, she's charging people a lot of money. She tells people she can heal their pets. Don't take your pet to a vet. Just put it on the phone with me, and I'll heal it.
Right.
Like, this is ridiculous, crazy, and she charges people like $300 for that.
Well, regular vets are charging much more than that. So
yeah, maybe it's a deal if it works, but
maybe it's a deal if it doesn't work.
I'm a little suspect of it actually working, though.
If
right?
your dog is a hypochondriac, which I'm sure some of them are, or at least maybe the dog's owner is a hypochondriac for the dog, and so maybe that'll work just as well.
Yeah, and somebody's mentioning Houdini busted the spiritualists. He had a personal
Houdini
had a personal vendetta against spiritualists because he was very distraught over the death of his mother, and he went to every medium he could find and found them all to be frauds.
He found they were all basically shitting him,
Yeah, and then he made it a point to expose them.
Yeah, exactly. And that was just about 100 years ago. It was like in 1920 he started this campaign. He only lived for about like 6 years after that, but he sure did a whole lot in that amount of time.
Yeah. So after your association with Randy and these skeptical organizations, is there a lot more UFO cases that you looked into and found to be garbage?
Oh, well, heck, I'm usually, should we say, I'm not like the first line investigator. And class always advised against trying to get into that situation because, he said, they can cite them a lot faster than you can explain them. And you might put a lot of time and effort into this, and it goes nowhere because everybody say, "Well, you had an easy case there. Why don't you take a hard one?" So he would always wait, and I would tend to do this also. Wait until the UFO investigators or the UFO organizations tell you that, this case is amazing. Wait for MUFON or somebody like that to tell you that it's amazing, and then you go and look into it. No point in looking into.
So focus on the bigger. You want to focus on the bigger cases.
Exactly.
Right?
Focus on whatever is a big case of the moment. What's the biggest case of the moment? Some people are saying it's this Anjali thing where she's claiming there's aliens in the mountains.
I interviewed her, and that's a whole can of worms.
Yeah, I heard some of that, and I've read some of the other stuff she's been saying. And frankly, I don't see why anybody takes her seriously because
there's nothing new under the sun. You know that, Mr.
You're
Sheaffer.
right.
There's nothing going on. So this woman came out, and everybody was like, "All right, there's an alien base." And
right.
I have to say that I was very, very skeptical at first, but then I started doing background checking on her and found that her background was at least real. So I thought, that she was something of a unicorn in this thing, because I thought her military thing was going to be fake, or her employment with the DIA was going to be fake, or her employment was going to be fake. Turns out all that's real. So I at least said, I'll interview her. And then we found the base, or not the base, I'm sorry. We found the guy, Wayne, we believe we did, and the mountain, and also the guy who visited this coffee shop with her. So then I went, at least parts of her story are true. Let's talk to her and find out more. And everybody was talking about it. So I have to admit that selfishly, I knew it would get a lot of views. And I said, okay, let's interview her and see if we can find out more. Now, yesterday, she was just on a live stream with me as a guest on another girl show. It's Alien Girl 111, if anybody wants to see it. And she said that she went there back to the mountain, and the guy named Wayne wouldn't let her on the property. So now her expedition to show everybody the aliens and the proof is postponed indefinitely. So everybody went like, what a big letdown, right? You know?
Oh, yeah.
And tomorrow I'm going to be doing a show at 9 p.m. Eastern time with a whole panel. And you're welcome if you want to come back, Mr. Sheaffer, but we don't want to work you too hard in 1 week, you know?
No, wait,
but we're going to do a whole panel on her tomorrow, a panel show. And we're going to have a television producer who apparently talked to this Wayne, flew drones over the site. And according to him, at least, there's no tunnel, there's nothing. So
Ryan Gordon, right?
Yes, Mr. Gordon, who mentioned you
I was
being
just
a friend of
talking
yours.
to him. I was just talking to him a short time ago. Yes.
Well,
and
sure
he found that the, this so-called cave or whatever it doesn't exist in a mountain. It's like in suburban backyard, practically. I mean, almost literally. And Jolly says, oh, it's out in the desert somewhere. It's in the Mojave Desert. I'm thinking, yeah, she's going to get four-wheel drive vehicles, and they're going to go driving off to some remote spot like a Damski or George Van Tassel and the Integratron. There's lots of
the giant rock, right?
Yeah, there's a lot. And Giant Rock, Giant Rock is not too far down the road. So I mean, there's lots of aliens out there in the desert if you go looking for. And her aliens are right there in this guy's backyard. I mean, oh wait a minute.
I want to thank Lee Guy for a kind and generous $4.99 super chat. He says, I feel like the CE5 thing is very similar to the Geller trick when he convinced people he fixed their electronics over the airwaves. All suggestion. Yeah, very well could be. And Patrick Sheehan with a kind and generous $4.99 super sticker. Thank you guys for your kindness, your generosity, and your support. Viewer-supported show. There's a money button down there. Throw some more money at me. We love it. Praise the cash, friends. Thank you very much for your kindness, your generosity, and your support. And people can see my new background here. We're upgrading the studio so things don't have to be so tight on me, you know. And all of this studio upgrades, the lighting and the backdrops all came from the kind and generous support of our kind and generous benefactors. So thank you all very much. Yeah, so when you first heard this Anjali story, did you wonder, like, why is anybody even paying attention to this? Because I did, but then I realized there's nothing new. There's nothing new for years going on.
Right. That's I had that exact same reaction. That I read what she's saying about she's visited by beings in her bedroom. She, she sees dead people all the time, and the aliens are here to sort of help us to rise to the next level of consciousness.
Space Brothers.
Evolution.
It's the Space Brothers.
Space Brothers, yeah. This is classic New Age BS that's been around for decades. There's absolutely nothing new in that. I think the funniest part of it is she says she went to this cave and so on in the mountain, and she was teleported back to Wayne's house, whatever the guy's name is, to his house. Well, that's a pretty neat trick, to get teleported somewhere. So, but as soon as you read that, you realize this is a made-up story. This is not anything real.
Yeah, I will say this though, having spoken to her personally, Mr. Sheaffer, I feel sorry for her because she did this, and exactly what I kind of predicted. I said, if this doesn't go well for her, it's going to be devastating to her, and people are. Rightfully or wrongly, people are attacking her very viciously all over social media right now for, being a liar or letting everybody down or telling everybody she was going to get the proof. I still feel from a human perspective that I feel bad for her because it can't be, I question her judgment for some of the things she's done, my thing was, instead of holding a press conference, why don't you go back and get the proof first and then hold the press conference? Instead of making all these wild promises and then not delivering on your promises,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, people like her, I mean, she's sincere, she's deluded. Betty Hill was like that. I knew Betty Hill, the famous so-called UFO abductee of Betty and Barney Hill. She was basically a crazy old lady, and but she believed everything she said, and I couldn't possibly get angry with her or anything like that. She says crazy stuff. Okay, I mean, that's how she is, but and I suspect we've got the very same thing here with Anjali, and but the people I get, kind of ticked off at are those who make up shit and say stuff that we know are not true, and but try to, use it to build. Maybe sometimes it's hard to know exactly who is sincere and who isn't, but a lot of these people are just in it for the money, and others are kind of sincerely deluded.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too. I'm glad to get to talk to somebody who's a veteran at this, like you, because it's like some things never change. The Space Brothers narrative never changed since the 50s contactees. And the profit motive, buy my book, buy my course, come out to my, conference at Big Rock. We're going to be contacting aliens telepathically and calling them in. It's like some of these things never change. They're like timeless. It's just new grifters pick up the old riffs and run with them,
And the elements of religion run through this, not through the NICAP and MUFON and QFOS, the people who try to analyze photos and stuff and are convinced of it, but rather through the Anyalis and the New Agers and all this kind of stuff. These are religious themes, and they have to do with human frailty and human perfection, and an afterlife or an improved life somehow on the next level. These are these are fundamentally religious ideas.
Yeah, and Ryan is here and says, let's not talk about believing things people say who use fake names. Yeah, I don't know that I blame her for that, Ryan. Like, she needed a cooler new age name, so she changed Angelina to Anjali.
Yeah, anybody can be.
That's kind of harmless to me, but I really am worried, like, because I felt from talking to her before the interview briefly, and then after the interview briefly, and in the interview, that she was somewhat psychologically fragile. And
I got the same perception.
And this new situation with being, she's supposed to be on this mission to bring everybody the truth about aliens, and she made a lot of big promises, and now it's all coming crashing down. Because I don't know a way that she can't legally go on the guy's property at all if he says no. So what is she going to do now? And people are already theorizing, and some of her huge supporters and believers are trying to spin this, that it's a good thing because now the aliens will have to come directly to her. And that's another thing. If she talks to the aliens every day, I don't understand why she needs the mountain at all. If Wayne says no, then why doesn't she say, okay, well, meet me down the corner from Wayne's at this public park and I'll do the proof part? I just, a lot of this doesn't make any sense. And, we also get yesterday, which I was kind of disappointed about, but it's human nature. A whole bunch of guys came out and did like a victory lap. Like, see, I told you she wasn't going to give us the proof about the aliens. Like they had some amazing insight that nobody else had. Like 99% of the people kind of knew that she wasn't going to bring us.
Yeah, I put that on my, I said that in several comments to different people. This is not going to happen. This is something this expedition, this is simply not going to happen.
Oh, author from Melbourne. Okay. Yeah, I think I know who you mean. And, I'm sorry that you guys are in some kind of tiff, but I'm trying to remain neutral because I like both those people, both Ryan and the person he's talking about, I consider good researchers, so I got to walk a tightrope balancing act here.
There you go.
And, it's
and they're both listening to this show. Right
yes.
Now.
And, people tend to be very passionate in this thing, man. People are, very passionate about their beliefs, and it is what it is, right? So what have you been doing lately since you left writing for this Skeptical Inquiry magazine and all that stuff? You said you left basically because of politics and nonsense, right?
They're no longer really a skeptical organization. They're more of a politically oriented organization.
Wow.
So what I've been doing is, well, basically my own stuff. Basically, what I've been doing is I've been writing about on the blog, and so a lot of it having to do with Travis Walton, having to do with To the Stars, and all this nonsense. So
it's somewhat of a circus, isn't it? It's like a
oh,
circus, this
definitely,
thing.
yeah, it's circus and lots of clowns.
Step right up, right?
What's
I'm
not
one of
to
those
like, right?
clowns.
Yeah.
I'm one of those clowns, so I can't
Yeah.
say anything about
Yeah.
that.
Or one fellow said he came to ufology for the promise of aliens, but he stayed for the clown show.
Yeah. Yeah, some people were calling me a clown because I did these masks of the common characters,
Oh,
and I sat there like I was them and said stuff like "Send me the money, I want the money." But it's like a circus. It's like and it's got the carnival barkers like come right on into this conference. This is a disclosure conference. We're going to disclose the truth about aliens. It's only $300 to come to our online
right.
conference, and like, come on. It's like the guy that stands outside the nudie bar. Step right up, live nude girls. But in this case, it's like aliens and disclosure. Come on in. This is
Yeah,
so
exactly.
stupid sometimes. Sometimes you can't do anything but laugh at this stuff, right? That's how I feel about it. Like,
Yeah, well,
got to
that's
blow off the
pretty
steam.
entertaining. Yeah, I agree.
I still have a genuine interest in this, though, and I think there may be something to some of these stories and cases, but the amount of garbage that you have to go through to get to one good case with some meat on the bones is disappointing and disheartening at times.
I'm sure.
Yeah, so you're just writing your blog and stuff like that. I hope that you will be good with coming back and being a contributor here, because we could use somebody of your knowledge and experience and expertise and a different perspective on some of the things that I'm already looking into, like Anjali and some of the other cases that we're following. We're doing a deep dive on these Wilson documents, and so far, what I can tell you is that Richard Dolan is relying on something like 8 or 12 anonymous sources. There's an anonymous source that got the documents from Edgar Mitchell's estate. There's another anonymous source that was leaked the documents and leaked them to the internet. There's another anonymous source that Richard Dolan knows that said that this Wilson was asking around about the alien projects, right? And you just have to believe him on all these anonymous sources to believe these Wilson documents. And I don't know how people can believe that many anonymous sources from a guy who's been caught using a completely, totally fake, made up anonymous source at least once.
Yeah, I don't remember which example that was.
It was the CIA deathbed confession. He actually interviewed a guy who had died in 2008 in 2014.
Oh, well. All you need is a medium or a psychic. That's not a problem.
No, he interviewed a real guy in 2014, but the problem is that Linda Moulton Howe reported that guy died in 2008. So I'd like to know how Richard Dolan interviewed a dead man in 2014 to sell that story that was fake. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there's so many of these BS, deathbed confessions or other things, or they interview somebody who's half dead and he says, get him to say something that's absurd, and it's not.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, did you ever do any coverage of Bob Lazar? Because that one comes back around now. Because
yeah, well, I've never met him or done a first my own investigation.
Oh no, you found something that I also found.
I dug around on a bunch of stuff.
To the Stars covertly publishes Bob Lazar's book and buys metamaterials from Tom DeLonge. Great.
Right. The Bob Lazar book was published by To the Stars, and then they realized that they shouldn't let people know that, and then they kind of took down the page that said that. But if you look at the traces there, the evidence, it shows that
Tom DeLonge's sister,
Tom DeLonge was behind this.
Tom DeLonge's sister registered the website for the brand new publisher that never published any book before Bob Lazar's.
Right.
And they got caught selling the book. And interestingly, I don't know if you know this, but at least I believe Gene Huff and John Lear both said that book was not written by Bob Lazar because it got way too many details wrong. And they both believe that it was written by a ghostwriter.
Well, does Lazar, has he accepted authorship, or he's not claiming?
He is claiming authorship. Yeah. And so there's never been a comment.
He must agree with the BS that it says. And if it contradicts his previous BS, well, so much the worse. But
yes, and you're covering here these arts parts,
Right.
which were completely and totally debunked already.
Yes.
That's an interesting story. Linda Moulton Howe hires a scientist to analyze the material. He comes back to her with a whole report that says this is just regular earthly materials. There's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing
scraps,
to this.
Basically,
It's scrap metal. Yeah, it's scrap metal. So then she fires that scientist and gets a new guy who will say that they have strange properties. Then she sells these materials to Tom DeLonge for $30,000, who then sells these materials. Tom DeLonge is running a disclosure organization. What does he do when he thinks he might have absolute proof of alien visitation to Earth? He takes those materials and he sells them to the United States Army, who's never going to tell us anything about it, right? It makes no sense.
Well, actually, I'm not sure that's quite true because they signed what they call a CRADA or something, which is supposedly it's an agreement to share testing resources and results. And in theory, if the Army does study that, they are obligated to
so they do have to
share the result because they don't have. I'm not aware that the Army did actually analyze anything. I think they signed this agreement that they would share materials, but I'm not aware that they ever actually did so.
Yes, and that was a whole other sort of publicity thing for Tom DeLonge and Lou Elizondo, that this Atom Research Project, that they had a vault somewhere, right, with all these alien materials in it, and Bigelow bought a warehouse somewhere in Las Vegas to house all the alien materials. And when you say we need a warehouse, that sort of implies that you have a lot of material. Why would you need a warehouse?
Yeah, we've been speculating about that for years because you know how when an airplane crashes and they reassemble the plane in a very huge hangar to try to see what they can learn about how it crashed and why it crashed. And I imagine a Bigelow and his people and Eric Davis and whoever the hell else is involved in this. I imagine them in a thing like that, and they're taking the pieces of the saucer crash and putting them together and trying to reassemble the saucer. And of course, that's not happening. So
no, and it appears to me they could
parts the size of a quarter or something. I mean,
yeah, they could house all they have in like a bank, a bank security.
In a drawer.
Yeah, bank drawer. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. It's just, this is again with this hype and the nonsense, right? So
that was supposed to be the explanation for the $22 million. If you go back to the very first New York Times story with Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, the claim was made that the budget was partly for whatever research or something, and partly to modify buildings in Las Vegas so that Bigelow can store metamaterials or something in them. And of course, none of that happened.
What happened with our $22 million? Can we see the warehouse? Nobody ever did.
Yeah. No, I think somebody did find their warehouse, and it's just a warehouse, and basically nothing has happened to it, and it's just nothing.
Maybe they hid the arts parts and the alien, parts at the hot dog stand, Mr. Sheaffer.
Yeah, that's possible. But the interesting thing is, I've never found any proof that there was ever actually a hot dog stand. I don't think that was real. I think it was a joke Tom DeLonge put in, and because he seemed to have put several jokes into his filings, his business filings. So
it's pretty interesting.
It's not clear what is to be taken seriously, if any of it.
It's crazy. And so somebody asked me earlier, and I always like to ask, especially the very skeptical guys, is there any cases, UFO cases, that you think were genuine UFOs or mysteries or actually aliens in all of your research?
Well, as far as so-called actual aliens, certainly not. There are some cases that are just kind of puzzling because it's a little hard to get enough information to know if you really have a full um understanding of what's happening. But no, there's none of them that make me think, oh, maybe there really are aliens out there. And and if there were such a case that I found that I was sure was a crash saucer or some kind of something that couldn't be explained except in terms of a really advanced technology, I'd be the first to publicize it, to let people know because
Well, I've been following your
I could
blog, so
become
call me
so
disappointed.
famous,
Yeah,
just
call
think
me
of how
disappointed.
famous I'd be. But then get all the book deals and all that stuff, and they'd be making movies about me and whatever. But no, but I don't think that's going to happen. And I've been an amateur astronomer most of my life, and in fact, many times Heineck took us, the students, up into the dome of Dearborn Observatory, and part of the classes was to learn how to use the large telescopes and how to do photography. In those days, there was no electronic, digital photography. It was all film. He taught us how to use this and how to do this, and we had projects photographing things and so on. So, I mean, I have a pretty good understanding of, what's up there and what you see and what you'll find and when you take pictures and so on. So but
Yeah, and
there's a lot of things people can be fooled by if they don't understand.
we're going to take some comments and questions from the live chat for you, if you don't
Okay,
mind. People
that's
are
good.
very curious, and you don't make a lot of appearances on shows like this, so we're honored to
Well,
have you
I
here.
make about as many as I've been asked to lately, but
Well, I got about 10
uh,
shows that would love to
all right.
have you if
Well,
you
that's
really
a
want to do more.
possibility.
I know a
I've been
lot
on
of show
Erica.
hosts that would love to have you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I've been on Erica Luke's a couple times and a few others here
Yeah,
and
she's
there.
great. We've had her
Yeah,
here as
yeah,
well. She's great,
yeah.
great girl. So Patrick Sheehan is asking, what is your opinion of Jacques Vallée? Jacques Vallée, is he
Yeah.
French intel scammer or what? I guess, right?
No, he's not a scammer, and he's not an intel. I'm quite sure he's not an intel. He's just a guy who believes a lot of this stuff. If you read his, what does he call it? Forbidden Science. He has like four volumes, I think, of essentially it's his diary. It's his life story, and talks about all the people he meets, and talks about Hynek, and talks about
Hmm.
pretty much all the people who were involved in ufology at the time, and it's a very worthwhile read. He's quite sincere, but he's one of these guys like Hynek. In fact, actually, if you want my opinion, he's more gullible than Hynek. He was pulling Hynek in the direction of gullibility. Hynek may have been resisting a little bit, but Vallée. I mean, now people are talking about space ghosts. That these people like Vallée and Puthoff and so on are supposedly looking for. And it's maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but not too far from it. He's not looking for nuts and bolts stuff. He's looking, well, of course, now maybe he is with this latest book about the so-called saucer crash in 45. But generally, he's looking, it's all paranormal and stuff. Read some of these books. Oh, there's a book called The Invisible College. And in fact, I have a little bit of information about it on my blog. It's written by Hynek and by Vallée. I think Vallée is the principal author. And It's filled with nonsense. I mean, if you read it, you just, oh my God, he's, ghosts is not a bad description of, what he's talking about. He's talking about fairies and such, that they might be, apparitions of aliens or something, or whatever the aliens are. The fairies were the same, and that goes back to what the passport to Magonia, he says, and no, he's a very sincere guy, but I think uh,
He's a true believer.
yeah, he's a true believer. He believes that the universe that we see around us isn't really what's around us, and that there's some ultimate reality that's still eluding us, and one of these days we'll find it.
Wow. Yeah, and I also found suspect. He's been touting these materials that he's claimed to be studying, and he always says pretty out there things like the isotopic ratios prove that they weren't made on Earth and all of these things. but we never get to the scientific paper or the proof of his claims about those materials. Though he's been saying that for years, I don't know. But then somebody told me it was in one of his books, some of the proof. So maybe I'm incorrect.
I don't recall. I don't recall if I've seen that. I know that there were other people claiming this. What was that guy's name? Who was Marcel Vogel? Was a guy who was a ufologist. His claim to fame, I guess, was that he worked for IBM, and in fact, he actually was a pretty important guy, like a research scientist at IBM in San Jose, I think. And I heard him give a talk once, Marcel Vogel, and it was full of crazy stuff about crystals. You know, he was talking about the magic principles of crystals, and if you take a healing crystal and you hold it up here like this, it makes you stronger than, you know, and whatever. And so he published a paper claiming the same thing about some, I don't even remember whose parts it was supposed to have a isotope ratio that made it made it extraterrestrial. But then another guy who works who is a physicist and works with isotopic ratios and also involved with the skeptics group in Los Angeles. He said, you know, this is nonsense. He doesn't understand what he's doing, which isn't surprising, you know.
Yeah. Another great question from Blinken Liar. He wants to know your opinion on Gemini astronaut Gordon Cooper and his claim of an event at Edwards Air Force Base. Gordon Cooper once claimed that he witnessed a flying saucer land at Edwards Air Force Base and that there was film made of it.
I don't know if he claimed he saw it. He claimed somebody else saw it or whatever.
But
there's absolutely no evidence of this. And Jim Oberg has looked into this, and I don't recall the specifics. But basically, the claims you've heard about Gordon Cooper and UFOs are not really true. He was a believer, and you know he believed that UFOs were out there. Some people say he saw them in space, but he didn't. And now, you know, many people have said that there was an event at Edwards Air Force Base, or isn't that where President Eisenhower supposed to have met aliens?
Met with the aliens, yeah.
Yeah, and these rumors have been going on for a long time, but there's no proof of any of them.
Interesting. And Mike Williams asked, what is your opinion of the Zimbabwe school sighting? That one has been popularized again due to James Fox's recent documentary, where they re-interviewed the children that were the witnesses of that event, and the children stuck to their stories after 25 years or 30 years.
Yeah, they're adults, not children now. But, well, I did write one on that, and if you put in, whatever it is, that's the school, what's the aerial school or something like that. Bottom line is the interview techniques that were used were very bad, and any psychologist looking at that would realize that the children were being interviewed together. They could hear each other's stories. They didn't separate them. They were leading the witnesses. So it's really not a very right. There you go.
Yeah, a new investigation of the 1994 aerial school case. Interesting. I didn't know that they interviewed the children together. That's kind of problematic for me.
And Dr. Mack, who should have known better. Really, Dr. Mack was a psychiatrist at Harvard University. He really should have known all this stuff, but for some reason he didn't.
Yeah, and here you wrote earlier about Emily Tim, who was one of the witnesses to the incident in 1994. She spoke to the International UFO Congress in February and gave an extremely emotional account of her experience. She spoke on ET contacts in the aerial school incident. Her talk was highly emotional. She was crying as she speaks of encountering ETs floating above the ground. She said that she fell to her knees before one such being whose face kept changing between that of an alien and that of a lion. She has also had a conversation with a magic butterfly. The audience liked Mrs. Trim's talk so much that they gave her a standing ovation. This is the one who claims continuing contact, I believe, and that she has,
I think so,
been given a mission by those aliens to somehow, warn people about climate change and things like that, which is another common riff in the UFO community, that the aliens are here to warn us that we're going to destroy our ecosystem and that we have to make changes. We hear
Yeah,
that time and
sometimes
time
it's
again.
that, sometimes it's atomic energy they're warning us about. They're always warning us about something, or maybe it's low, maybe it's, we don't love our neighbors or something like that. But yeah, yeah, but as you can see, but getting back to this woman, this witness, it is such an emotional thing there, and is not clearly this is not an objective description of anything and a magic butterfly and whatever. If this is your best UFO case, well, it's pretty questionable.
Yes, and Kepst is asking your opinion of the Holloman Air Force Base landing in the chit chat. I believe it was Holloman and Edwards that were both claimed to be landing sites of
Yeah, yeah,
aliens,
I
where
think there were also.
Eisenhower, yeah.
No, Eisenhower was supposed to be, was it Edwards or was it Holmes? I thought he was supposed to be at Edwards. Well, it doesn't matter. It's a made-up story. Uh, well, I don't really know anything more about that. I mean, it's the same thing. There's just no evidence of any of this being true.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
unfortunate. It's very
Right.
unfortunate. Well, boy, we're running rapidly out of time. I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. And I really hope that you won't be a stranger, because we'd like to have the perspective of a veteran researcher and writer like you here in the future. We do these panel shows sometimes, and I'd like to have as many opinions as possible, especially somebody with your experience. It's
Yeah, we
it's
can do
really,
that. That's
really,
not a
really
problem.
well received. Yeah. So, what are you up to? Are you like retired now? Do you have like a day
Yeah,
job
yeah,
or?
I'm retired. I used to work in the Silicon Valley on software development, real-time software, that kind of thing, digital telephony. And I've been basically I'm retired. I'm working on UFO nonsense as well as
That's a good word for it. I'm working on
other
UFO
stuff.
nonsense in my
Yeah,
retirement
yeah.
here.
And also, I'm still involved in opera productions. We just finished doing Die Fledermaus up at a
Yeah, I've
small
heard.
opera
People
company
don't know this
nearby.
about you, but I've heard that you're an incredible opera singer. Somebody
Well,
told me that about you.
at least good enough to actually get away with singing it. So
Yeah, I don't know
before a
how you
real
remember.
audience, and so
That's a
yeah,
lot of that's a
yeah,
lot of Italian, right? I don't know how people remember all that.
yeah. Oh
Oh,
well.
and Lee Guy is asking, how do you feel about UFO and nuke stories? We hear
Well, that's
these.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
on there too on the blog. Basically, the story as he tells it, Hastings, isn't really how it happened, and now I'm trying to have to go over that again to see if I got all the details right. But it's basically that he attributes an incident happening at place A and time A that really happened at time B, and it doesn't line up, and so on. If you refer to that, it's I've got the details on there. But yeah, all these old things come back. It's like ufology believes in recycling. It's probably the most efficient recycling organization that I know. They take every old story and just spin it around a little, polish it up, and then bring it as if it was new. And what year was this supposedly? Well, this was, I don't know, 1960 something or seven. No, it was 1960s, wasn't it? UFOs and nukes and oh Lord, it just never goes away. They just keep coming up with and the Trent photos and all these other goodies. So yeah, that's
Yeah, and I
some of
happen to
it.
find I was searching nuclear on your website, but I happen to find this is the video you mentioned here, a 15-minute
Yeah.
video uh, was about to be shown of a 77-year-old man in very bad health who wanted to take the opportunity to reveal the story of what happened to him while he worked for the CIA under President Dwight Eisenhower in 1958. Uh, he wanted to take the opportunity to reveal a story of what happened to him while he worked for the CIA. X goes on to talk about how Eisenhower was so upset when he learned that there was activity going on at the base in Nevada that would later be renamed as Area 51 that the government allegedly had no jurisdiction over. Eisenhower sent X and his boss to the base to find out what was going on there. This is the man that Jeremy Corbell and Richard Dolan claimed to have interviewed in, I believe it's 2014. But the problem with that is that the original source came from Linda Moulton Howe, who's the queen of fake sources to begin with. But
Yeah.
she reported that this same man died in 2008. So my question is, how did Richard Dolan and Jeremy Corbell interview a man in 2014 that died apparently in 2008? There was also a book written about him, Anonymous, the CIA Deathbed Confession, written by Ron Gardner, who also claimed to interact with this man in and around 2012 to 2014 after he was already dead, and then wrote a book based on a dead man's testimony. It's great. This is the circus of UFOs.
Yeah, 16 men on a dead man's chest or something.
Yeah. Lord Ludicrous Plaid with $1.99 super chat. Love the show. Keep up the great work. My pleasure, Lord Ludicrous Plaid. Thank you for helping us to praise the cash. Thank you for your kindness, your generosity, and your support. Yeah, your blog is interesting because I did do some searches, and it seems like anything I put a search in on, you've already written something about it, right?
Well, it goes back like 11 years, I think, or something. So yeah, it's been there for a while.
Yeah, I put in Bob Lazar. We see this article about Bob Lazar's book, and then Art's Parts. This is pretty funny too. I'm going to share this. You're here with my buddy Richard Dolan. Did you know he's a huge fan of mine? No, I think he hates my guts.
I think well, I kind of count him among the BSers,
That's a shame because don't you think that he has this shtick where he pretends to be like a college professor, kind of serious researcher?
Oh yeah, he does, and
he pretends that, and then he
imagine why
fakes. Yeah, then he fakes stories. He's interviewing dead men, saying that they're a guy that died, and nobody's supposed to know that guy died in 2008. And he said that he had classified information from the classified version of the UAP report. And I called him on that, saying that, he would get arrested if he was in possession of classified materials and was disseminating it to his audience. And then he had to walk that back big time, I just don't understand. And then you have an article here on Jaime Maussan, who I think is the greatest UFO fraudster.
He's a major fabricator for all kinds of crazy UFO stuff. My favorite one of Jaime Maussan, well, of course, we're all familiar with the so-called Roswell slides from 6 years ago, and how he was you could be a witness to this if you pay the money and so on. It turns out it was a dead, a mummy of a Native American child. And,
yeah, somebody in the live chat. He did a 35-minute video walking back all the stuff that he said after I said that's garbage. You'd be in prison, right? And I don't think somebody like Richard Dolan would do very well in prison, but that's just my opinion, right? Yeah. Right. So, but yeah, Jaime Maussan, for those that don't know, also was responsible for a hoax claiming that they had an alien body when it was a mummified spider monkey.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. And also the fairies. People could look up, Jaime Maussan fairies. He had these like winged creatures, and it turns out that they were glued together from a bunch of different animal bones and stuff like that.
Oh, really? I didn't see that one, but what I saw, my favorite was he had on the cover of one of his magazines, it said, Un caballo en el cielo. In other words, a horse in the sky. And it was like that, those old commercials for Phillips 66 or whatever with the horse flying up there. You were supposed to believe that somebody in Mexico got a picture of a horse flying across the sky.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that guy believes anything, right?
I don't think he necessarily believes any of them. And he has a business down there. And he sells magazines and... well, in fact, we visited him when I was in Mexico on this UFO trip in 1966. We checked out all the sightings and whatever, and he had a whole office there. They were making VHS tapes at the time. I'm sure it's DVDs now, and as well as selling books and such. And that's a big business.
Interesting. I was trying to find something about those fairies and I couldn't find it, but I'm sure that there's a researcher, a Christian researcher, L.A. Marzulli, who was convinced at first that these fairies were real, that they were some kind of demon creatures or something. And then after the analysis, unfortunately, L.A. Marzulli had to walk everything back himself, saying that I got fooled by Jaime Maussan and I should have known better because he's fooled other researchers with the Roswell slides. And he's never commented. Jaime Maussan has never commented. They made hundreds of thousands of dollars on that pay-per-view Roswell slides event. and he's never given any of the money back, even after it was determined that it was completely and totally fake. I love how they never give the money back, even when they get caught with their pants down, right?
Well, a fool and his money will soon go to the Roswell event or some such thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and here's some words on Jeremy Corbell and Bob
well,
Lazar
he was
and George
just
Knapp.
starting to get into the big deal UFO business. He had some other silly movie that he made.
Silly, yeah, it was definitely silly. I like to remind people that I sent Jeremy Corbell a treasure trove of proof that Bob Lazar is a liar and a fraud, and none of that made it into his so-called documentary. And he once famously said to me, "Steve, if the story's fake, there's no documentary deal." That's what he told me. So yeah. So he just it was all about getting a deal for a documentary. Did you follow these videos that he'd been releasing, like that pyramid one with the flashing lights that matched FAA lights?
I did a lot on that. I wrote there's a blog entry on that one too. Look up bokeh, B-O-K-E-H, which is the Japanese term for an out of focus image. It's a term for how an optical system represents an out of focus image. And the geniuses in the so-called UAP task force of the Pentagon didn't understand optics in the least. And not only is this thing, or if you can't find that, just look for.
No, I've got it.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. Right. And there we go. There's Jeremy. And see, there's out of focus image. But when an image is out of focus in an optical system, it will take the same shape as the aperture of the front. For example, in a typical camera, you've got like 6 or 8, little leaves that close and open, and you'll see that when the images are out of focus. In this case, it's a triangular aperture, and it's because this is a night vision device. But and then you go a little further. Some people have gone to the trouble of actually figuring out what we're seeing in these out of focus images, and it turns out it's actually we're just seeing an airplane moving across the star field that includes Jupiter and the stars of Sagittarius and Aquila or some such. There you go. This is a bokeh. Okay, this one.
Yeah, I know that people have reproduced that UFO pretty well.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. This and this, the green circle, and then the one below it. These are exactly the same. This is the so-called UFO, and then you got Jupiter. Then you got the stars and the constellation Scorpius. Everything matches up perfectly, just out of focus. That's all.
Yeah, and if that aperture is set a certain way, every star in the sky or light source is going to appear to be a triangle UFO.
Yeah. But see, you have an autofocus in most all modern optical systems, and so it's when it doesn't have a clear image, or when it's just like a dark night sky, autofocus isn't going to work very well. So you're typically going to see things out of focus.
Yeah, and here we see the aperture adjusted to the triangle kind of a setting, which makes every light source look like a triangle.
Right. This was considered, advanced optics or something that the so-called government, the UAP task force, just couldn't figure this out.
It makes me think that they've got a lot of people that shouldn't be working for them, right? Well, what did you say earlier? Good enough for government work?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I don't think it's more than 2 or 3 people working on this. I don't. If they had anybody do anything about photography, they would, they'd know this. But
yeah, this is great. The balloons, Batman balloons.
Yeah.
I love the Batman one, and you can even see here the
kind of almost see the Batman outline. Yeah, almost. It may not be Batman, but it's something like that.
Yeah. Metallic blimp photo almost takes on a shark appearance. Yeah.
Yes.
Look, there's the shark.
There's your shark, right? Yeah.
These guys appear like they would use anything. Like, I don't know, if it was me looking at these images, and the one in the middle here, people have suggested but people have suggested that's a reflection off of an iPhone, and that's the camera lens reflecting off of the fighter canopy. So that's not it may not be an object at all.
Whatever it is, it's out of focus.
Yeah. Somebody did an analysis and determined that this is most likely the aperture, the camera from an iPhone reflecting on the canopy of the aircraft. That, so there's no image out there in the sky. It's just a reflection, or of the actual iPhone camera aperture, the little round camera on the back of a iPhone. Yeah. This one I don't know that was really debunked, but this one everybody says Batman balloon.
Yeah, no, the one on the left is the one that's supposed to be the shark, I think.
Oh, the shark, yeah. So we've got the shark, a lens, a lens reflecting on an airplane canopy, and a Batman balloon. But to George Knapp,
fool, it's a Pentagon UFO analyst. It'll fool them,
Yeah, and the other thing that people don't realize is just because the Pentagon says, these were images taken by our personnel, doesn't mean that they haven't already determined that these are balloons or not threatening and not aliens.
Well, you would think they would announce that if they'd said that. Said, well, we looked at this and we thought they were balloons. I would think if the fact that they haven't said this, and they've basically just released them and without comment, I think means that they don't know what it is either.
Yeah. Well, we all know how wonderful a job everybody in government does, right? I mean, I'm sure there's some good people, but if you've ever been to the DMV or the post office, you'd be cursing at government workers too, Yeah. It just seems like they're always nasty and rude because they can't get fired. It's like, right? I don't know. They hire some real winners too. So, this one, Lee Guy says the metallic blimp looks like an out of focus Airbus Super Guppy.
Yeah,
there's another possibility.
Something like that. Yeah. Maybe it's a big guppy.
And Victor Caliero contributing that the 3 pics, including the Batman balloon, were all taken 30 minutes apart near Virginia Beach, which has a big problem with people releasing party balloons. They issue fines for it now. That's very interesting. That's the
explanation, right? And they don't see them anymore.
And the Sixth Sense says, Robert, the search feature on your site works wonderful. Yeah. Listen, I'm going to put, it's badufos.blogspot.com. I'm going to put the blog. I'm a terrible show host. I'm going to put your blog into the description of the video here so anybody can visit it. And no matter what UFO case you're interested in, if you put it in the search bar, you may find some resources there, right?
Yes.
And Victor says,
it's likely the major cases.
You can see Virginia Beach in the background of one of the pictures. That's great.
Maybe. Well, that's a big Navy base, right? In Virginia Beach.
Yeah. And Victor Collier also contributes, ask yourself why the triangle video is cut to end just at the time you'd expect the person filming would have adjusted the focus. Also very suspect. Yeah. Mike Williams says, see no more Belgian triangle flap. Problem solved. I don't know. I think there might have been something to the Belgian flap because there was too many witnesses to different craft and different events, right?
Too many witnesses and yet not a single authenticated photo. The one photo that we have from this Patrick guy, and it's now admitted to be a hoax. And if hundreds or thousands of people are seeing UFOs and not a single photo of it, what? Okay.
Yeah, and then that's another question I have for you, because I'd like to know your thoughts on it. With the increase in camera quality, right? I mean, there's people making movies on iPhones now.
Yes.
People have made movies just with the camera
quality of just a very simple phone, Android or iPhone today, is equivalent to what 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you'd pay $200 and get a small camera, and it's equivalent to that. So you really you would expect that there could be some very high quality photos of UFOs or any strange thing that's up there, but there's not.
Yeah, there was a great deal of hype surrounding these releases, both by George Knapp and by Jeremy Corbell. And again, I don't. If I was in possession of those, I would have done the work first to get them analyzed or ask image analysts or specialists what their opinion of it is before I released it, and definitely before I hyped it all up. But in this backwards world of the UFO hucksters, no, if you got something that you could sell monetize clicks and views,
Right.
you release and you worry
Right.
about the fallout later, make up some excuses for why it's,
Well, but maybe, it said that Elizondo had a zero budget for his program, ATIP. Maybe he couldn't afford any photoanalysts.
Yeah. Art L7 is asking if you could give your view on what happened to OSAP. Did it shut down in 2010 as cited by Lukatsky? And ATIP had no funds, was just made up program. That means the New York Times is wrong. Did Elizondo have a role in anything? I'd say I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say I don't know, but I would think if he did have a role, he should have been able to prove it by now. Yeah, and what he just said was it's covered in the last posting that I made on the blog about Elizondo. And Lukatsky says Elizondo had zero budget. Zero. Well, what are you going to do with that? Is that a program? How can you have a program with zero budget?
Yeah, I'm starting to get.
I think it was like a hobby. It was like a side.
I'm starting to get that feeling.
Club. Yeah,
it was a club, and Senator Harry Reid was in on it, and Bigelow was in on it, and Elizondo was in on it, and Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis. You can't show me any other person that was in on this program or that has admitted to involvement with it except for Puthoff, Elizondo, and Eric Davis.
Well, there are some other authors of the 38 papers. Now, some of them you've mentioned, but there are other authors whose names I can't think of right now, but possibly somebody might want to interview them, see what they could say.
Yeah, I'm going to put on my list of things to look into. So you're giving us some new leads and giving us an education into your vast experience as a veteran debunker. I'm going to get in trouble. You know I'm going to get in trouble for having you here. People are going to, why'd you have a skeptic on? Don't you want to know? I guess the final question, this is really the final question. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but it seems to me that some of these UFO true believers are really nasty, argumentative, and just terrible to some of the skeptics, even when the skeptics are proving that the stories are fake. Like Mick West is the one that proved this Boca and this triangle UFO was likely fake, and he got attacked very viciously for it.
Oh yeah. Is
it just? Do they just want to believe their fairy tales, so they're going to attack anybody that disproves them, or
well, they think it's a wonderful. They think they're onto some wonderful discoveries, and the only reason that the whole world doesn't know about all this UFO proof is because skeptics have convinced everybody that it's all fake. And if the skeptics would just shut up, they could show everybody that it's true. But it's as Phil Glass used to say, they would accuse him of being a debunker. And Glass would say, a thing can only be debunked if it's filled with bunk in the first place.
That's a good way to put it. And Victor Caliero commenting that Lukatsky saw an apparition at Skinwalker that looked like the Tubular Bells album cover. Tubular Bells is the theme for Exorcist. And I looked this up, and I may have some explanation for what it is that he saw.
Yeah, I have no idea what he saw.
Oh, no, look, I'm going to share this, and then we'll let you bounce out of here. Sorry for keeping you so long here. This is what he apparently saw in the sky. And the thing is, when I was a child, there was something that was like this, but it was black. And you would fill it with air, and then you would lay it out in the sun in a field.
Oh,
and
yeah, solar balloon.
A solar balloon, yes. And I had them when I was a child. And at times, they would look like this in the sky because they were a long, thin, tube made of like plastic bag material, like a trash bag. And some of the air would come out and they'd flap around in the wind and they would look like this. So I don't see that as some groundbreaking sighting that has to be aliens. But that's just my take on it, having experience with solar balloons. Could easily be a solar balloon. Yeah. And Cal Korf saying, David wrote 5% of all papers. I could send you the charts. Great. And Patrick Sheen commenting that Skinwalker is used for U.S. Special Ops for PsyOps training. Some people believe that it's a psychological warfare test center. Could be. Anyway, I want to thank you very much for your time and all of the great insight that you could share with us today concerning your many years looking into, what did you call it? UFO nonsense.
Sometimes I say that, or ufology, because there's ufology when people are trying to be careful and somewhat scientific, and there's ufology where they just say a lot of nonsense and believe every story they hear. And unfortunately, there's a lot more of ufology than there is ufology.
Yeah, and on that note, we're going to let you go. I hope that you will return because this has been great for me to finally talk to you after years of reading your blog. And, you have burst my UFO nonsense bubble on many occasions. And I want to thank you for that because I don't want to believe in fake stories. I want to know the truth behind these things. So if something's fake, I want to know it's fake.
Right.
And I hope others do as well.
Exactly. All right. Well, it's been great to talk to you.
Yeah, you keep up the great work, and I hope you'll come back for one of our panel shows or for a future.
We can do that at some point, I'm sure.
All right, great. Thanks so much for your help tonight. All right, bye-bye. Wow, friends, what a great night. Tonight I got Mr. Sheaffer off my list, and I've had him on my list for quite some time. Here we're still working on this multi-camera setup, so you'll have to excuse me if, it's like I was dreaming when I wrote this. Forgive me if it goes astray. There we go. This one has a bunch of different options, and I've got all kinds of remotes now, buttons to push. That's all I need. I can barely work the show now, and me, like a dummy, what do? I add a whole bunch more buttons and options and things, right? So, I'm sorry for any of the wonderful questions that we did not get. To ask Mr. Sheaffer, but I'm sure that tonight may be the first of many appearances from his. I'm hopeful, anyway. I think he had a good time recounting some of his experience from his very long career looking into these things. You can notice that poster is messed up. It got screwed up. I got to get a new one. But this is the obligatory. If you're going to do a UFO show, you got to have this poster. It comes with the job. I want to believe, right? Mike Williams says, who's next? Michael Shermer. I have asked him for an interview 3 times. He's never replied to an email. Cal Korf says, Lukatsky is a bit gullible, as in can be persuaded. Yeah. Yeah, funny how people don't talk about how OSAP obtained 11 UFO databases, including the MUFON database. Yeah, nice of all those people who were reporting things, right? All these people were reporting things to MUFON, not know, and they thought that their names and their addresses and everything was going to be kept confidential, but no, MUFON sold it to Bigelow, who then sold it all to the government. Right? And in some cases, some people are very distrustful of the government, so they wanted to go to a private organization like MUFON, and none of them had any idea that MUFON was handing all of their data over to first a billionaire, Robert Bigelow, who then would hand it right over to the Pentagon. Great. Yeah. So tomorrow night, I have a special show planned. You guys all wanted to see this, an update on Anjali. And tomorrow night, we're going to have Ryan from Orion Adventures, who has been digging into the Anjali case and hasn't so far really, he hasn't spilled the beans on what he found. And tomorrow, I'm hopeful that he's going to be here spilling some of those beans. Apparently he's been in contact with this Wayne. He's been to the property, talked to Wayne, and has a great deal of information to share, which may contradict much of what this Anjali has been telling the public for some time now. I want to make it clear that I feel like we have to follow the facts of the case. So if there is evidence that refutes some of the things that this Miss Anjali has been saying, then we want to hear both sides of the argument and let people make up their mind. We'll also be having a panel discussion. So far, we've got Scott Brown, Ryan, and a few other people that have been following the case very closely since it began. And we're going to have a very good panel discussion. I'm just going to share my screen here. We're going to have a great panel discussion tomorrow night, 9 p.m. It is the Anjali and Update show. So we're going to have lots of different perspectives here. If you would like to be on the panel show, please do not hesitate. Contact me on Twitter. It's at Stephen Cambion. Please remember to follow me on Twitter. It's at Stephen Cambion. Also, you could email me at truthseekershow@gmail.com. And from there, I will, and everybody is welcome to be here on the panel regarding this update on Anjali. I'm hoping to get a few more people. We'd like to have a lot of different people's perspectives. I'm inviting Rich from Goof On, but he may have his own show to do at the same time. I'm also inviting Jeremy Rise, alien scientist. And just another note, some people have messaged me about the Ian Crossland interview, which got postponed, and it would appear that Tim Pool, who he lives with, came down with COVID, from what I'm hearing on Twitter, so that may be why he had to cancel at the last minute. We wish both Ian Crossland and Mr. Tim Pool, health and happiness. We hope those guys are doing well. And I'm going to be in contact with Mr. Crossland. We're going to try to reschedule that for sometime in the next couple of weeks. And I apologize for those who were disappointed with the last minute cancellation, but these things happen, especially in considering the current health crisis and things like that. Mr. Tim Pool canceled most of his shows this week, as I believe. He had a pretty serious case of COVID, but is luckily treated with, well, I'm not even going to get into that. YouTube doesn't like anybody talking about these matters, but he received excellent medical treatment and is doing very well, which we're glad to hear. And we hope Mr. Crossland is, healthy as well. And that will be rescheduled. These things happen. You got to roll with the punches here. So that's really what we're trying to do, is roll on with the punches here. Also, I am aware that people are emailing me that this show host said this or this show host said that. And I just want to tell you, I'm aware of some of the chatter out there, but I'm far too busy to be worried about what any people are saying. Now, it is getting kind of ridiculous. I think we have one show is up to 32 hours of coverage I call Critiquing Cambion. Friends, the gist of their argument is that I'm a sellout and I've had guests they don't like. Now, I just said that in 10 seconds, but somehow it took these guys 32 hours of coverage, Critiquing Cambion, to explain to people all of my many and varied sins and why nobody should support me. Nobody should listen to me anymore because I sold out and I had guests that they don't like, that I shouldn't have had. And now they've even moved on to apparently they're psychics themselves, because they're telling their audience what I would do if, for example, David Wilcock had some of the guests that I've had, or what I would do if David Wilcock said some of the things that my guests had, even attacking yesterday's guest, who happens to be one of the most successful ghost hunters and in-demand personalities in that community in the world today. She's at all the conferences as a paid speaker. She's a movie star, and but somehow, this isn't about jealousy, right? This isn't about anything other than me being a sellout, right? And by the way, the same guest that we had yesterday was on my show more than a year ago, and those guys said nothing. They had nothing negative to say. But now all of a sudden, she's evil now. And why would I have her on my show? These things are childish and stupid. And anybody attempting to turn people against me or away from me, I cut out of my life like a cancer. People are going to talk. I can't do anything but forgive them and hope that they find better things to do with their time than produce 32 hours so far. I think it's 32. I don't know. I have like the counter and the notes of like, okay, this show was 2 hours crying about me. This show was 2 hours crying about me. This one was an hour crying about me. It just gets ridiculous. Like, really? You're going to dedicate 32 hours of your life? That's a full on more than a day of your life crying about me. Now, what I'm going to do is pray that those guys just stop crying and start working on their own show, because all of this is about bitter, angry jealousy. That's what it is. Green with envy, can't stand to see me doing so well. And I got to tell you, folks, even though I am kind of sick right now, I've got a cold and a terrible sore throat. But I'm still looking good, smelling good, and feeling good. I'm feeling great about the show and the future of our show. We've just begun. And, I'm not going to worry about what somebody that's been failing at this for almost a decade is saying about my show, which is successful, or most people would argue is successful and continues to become more and more successful. I'm not going to worry about it. And there's a couple other ankle-biting idiots out there throwing their digs once in a while, not to the tune of 32 hours. Some other show hosts will do like one show about me every couple of weeks crying. And I just got to say, I love it. I live on the tears of these guys, these crybabies. Keep crying. I love it. Every time I hear that somebody's doing a 2-hour show crying about me, I love it. I don't listen to it because I don't have time to listen to some guy cry about me and everything I'm doing wrong. Could you imagine somebody sitting there for 32 hours complaining about everything I've done wrong on my show, all the sinful things I've done, all the selling out, all the terrible things I've done? Oh, they need 32 hours to try to turn people against me for all my sins, right? And yeah, somebody may be giving hints in the live chat. And there's a few others, And, like I said before, though, one of these shows had a meltdown thinking some tweet was about them when it was really about the other ankle-biting idiots that had just made a show crying about me supporting women in ufology. Sorry, not sorry. I support everybody having a voice in this thing, including women, And I got attacked viciously by some other show host, so I tweeted something, and somebody thought it was about them because, of course, it must be about them, right? Not about anybody else. Lisa M says, say get a life. Yeah, 32 hours. Wow, man. I think they're in love with me. That's what I think it is. I think they're in love with me and like spurned lovers because I won't bang them. And I'm married. Sorry if you're in love with me, right? All right, Levine says that's more time spent on the first and second impeachment trial prosecution of Donald Trump. Well, there's some perspective, Mr. Art Levine. Some guys did 32 hours of shows about me crying, right? Yeah, Lee Guy says, don't forget, Steven, you are our favorite douche. Yeah, I definitely am. And yeah, I guess a final note that I would say is, another friend of mine, and he's well known in conspiracy circles, but I'm not going to name him because it was a private conversation, but he won't mind me sharing an idea that he was expressing. So somebody expressed to me this idea that maybe you're too harsh on people, Stephen, because after all, if people make a mistake, that doesn't define their entire life. But I think we've been very fair in our coverage, and I have never really went after somebody that made one mistake and then found their road to redemption and became a force for good after making a mistake. I believe in a road for redemption for all men. But most of the people that we attack that are con artists and scamming people, they haven't done it once. They did it once and then they got away with it and they keep on doing it, right? So, I think I've been very fair in my coverage. And a rule going forward for me is going to be, I'm not going to nitpick if somebody makes a mistake because I've made mistakes as well, right? I'm not scamming anybody. I'm not selling fake stories or fake garbage or fake products that don't work, right? Even though some other show hosts are crying that I'm just like these other people, whatever. Yeah, so I guess our policy going forward is, if somebody makes a mistake, even if I can, hammer them for that mistake and they made a really bad mistake, if they truly are sorry for their mistake and they've moved on with their lives, I'm not gonna hammer them. And we've seen this with some people that have made mistakes. the best example that I could give is, I guess, Tyler from Secure Team 10. He made a lot of mistakes. He said a lot of stupid things. And then people sent me the dash cam footage of the police when he got a DUI arrest. Now, I almost ran with that story. But then I thought, I've never driven drunk, but I've sure done stupid things drunk. So I don't know that I should, be critical of him because he's human. He made a mistake, and I hope that he learns from his mistake and moves forward. And turns out I made the right decision because no matter what you think of the guy, he made mistakes. And he's trying to clean up his life. He's trying to do better now. Last I heard, he is doing better now. So there's that. Most of the people that we go after are people who are repeat offending scammers. They haven't done one thing wrong. They've done a lot of things wrong. They don't apologize for it, and they keep on scamming people. Those people are worthy of being critical of. Yeah, Patrick Sheehan says, raise your hand if you have done stupid drunk stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much where we're at. I'm going to check in one last time and make sure I did not miss any of the super chats. And remind you that this is a viewer-supported show. There is a money button down there in the live chat. If you want to throw money at me, it all goes to the show. We've seen this new set, which I'm very proud of. I have been working on this all week, right? And I think that this is going to be great. And it also, what you can't see on this side is that I've got another camera and side cameras as well, but I'm a little leery of testing all this live on air, so I'm going to do some more testing before we put that in. But soon we're going to be able to have real guests right here in the studio with me, and with different camera angles and things like that. All of this was generously provided by people throwing money at me, right? People who believe in what we're doing here and want to see the show succeed. And for those being critical that I'm making money here and calling me a sellout because they're not making any money, boo-hoo, show me on this doll where Stephen Cambion hurt you. Keep crying. For those people crying and complaining, all my shows, all this content will always be free. Now, you might have to sit through an ad or skip an ad if you want to watch for free. But anybody that wants to watch or listen to all of the content that I create, it will always be free. If people choose to support me, they can send a couple of bucks. They can sign up for a PayPal for as little as $1 a month and get extra content that isn't free, right? But even that's free because I've said it time and time again, and you people know that I say this. If you're really a big fan of the show and you're having a tough time and you would like to receive those Patreon benefits, and you're having a tough time, it's not a big deal. Just send me an email, truthseekershow@gmail.com. I know a lot of people are in reduced circumstances, and I wouldn't want to hold that extra content back from somebody who would really enjoy it just because they're short of $1 or more a month. So just email me at truthseekershow@gmail.com. I give it away for free. I keep a spreadsheet of those people. Some of them, their situations have improved, and they later gave me the $1 with great thanks for me helping them during a difficult time. We're all having a difficult time. If I can help any one of you, I would do that. I'm not big on putting anything behind a paywall, but the $1 a month just helps us with some of our expenses here. And the Patreon money really pays the show's bills. We have StreamYard bills every month. We have bills for Spreaker to put together to distribute the audio podcast. That's what I use the Patreon money for. And finally, you could buy me a coffee. There's links in the description. And Kari helps with the show here. There's a link to buy Kari a coffee in the description box below. And I'm going to check in. It looks like we did read all of the super chats tonight, but I'm going to check in with the PayPal and make sure that we haven't gotten. That's another thing you can do is to throw me a couple of bucks, throw a couple of bucks in our hat. We can take a PayPal donation. And I do encourage you, if you're going to send a large amount, to either send it through Buy Me a Coffee or through PayPal, because then we're not giving up 30% of it. There's the big chunk YouTube takes to those super chats. So yeah, I don't see any new PayPal donations. So we're all caught up and we're calling things out. Also, a few people have mentioned that we are a little bit behind on the audio podcast. I've been feeling very under the weather. You guys know that, and thanks to all who reached out to me. It's not COVID, near as I can tell, because my wife has virtually the same cold, and she got tested for COVID. She has to for work. It's definitely not. And we have people in the live chat that are crying. You're gonna cry in my live chat too? Oh wow, cry in my live chat. I love it. Come in my live chat and cry. Come in my live chat and cry. No, you're not welcome in my live chat until you apologize for all the lies that you've spewed about me. So what we're going to do is, until you're man enough to apologize, and I can point out chapter and verse of lies that you have straight said to people. Until you apologize for putting words in my mouth I never said, you're not welcome either in my live chat or anywhere else in my life. And you can cry and say, I won't come on your show because I'm afraid. I'm not going to do somebody a favor that has been trashing me for 32 hours straight. Get a life, loser. 32 hours of your life dedicated to me? You must be in love with me, loser. Why else would you spend 32 hours of your life? Now, I'm trying to find that comment, but I can't now in the live chat. Somebody must have hidden it or something like that. Let's see. Oh, I don't know how to block you from my channel right now. I have to figure that out later. For now, we'll mute you. You don't get a voice here because you're an angry, bitter little man. An angry, bitter little man that doesn't deserve my attention. You lost that ability when you made 32 plus hours of content crying like a little bitch about me. And that's where we're at. And I'm not doing anybody a favor that's made 32 hours of content crying about me. Me being a guest, do you have any idea how many people are emailing me wanting me to do a guest spot on their show? I'd much rather dedicate my time and offer my services as a guest on somebody's show to somebody who's kind to me, who's polite to me, doesn't put words in my mouth, and is not trying to turn audience members against me because they're a little bitch and a failure that has failed at what I am succeeding at. So I don't have time. I don't have time to help anybody that makes that much content crying about me, and I'm not going to. I'm under no obligation to help some idiot, and I'm not going to do it. And that's where we're at. And I guess this Thursday, you can go cry some more for another 2 hours, and then it'll be 34 hours. Do you see how ridiculous you look to people? People notice. We're keeping a tally of how many hours you've spent crying about me like a little bitch. Who does that, right? And who appointed you my judge and my jury? There's only two people in this world, well, really, four, I suppose, that I have to answer to. That is my wife, my children, my two boys, that's three, and God. Those are the only four people I care to answer to. And by the way, the only judge that's qualified to judge me is God. And I'm good. You can tell, you can do another 34 hours crying like a little bitch. Do another 34 hours crying like a little bitch about all my sins and everything I've done wrong and what a terrible person I am. Your whole show is now the crying about Cambion show. So I'm sorry, not sorry. You're not coming on my show. You're not welcome here. You're not even coming to my live chat. You're not welcome here, spewing your garbage. And I'm sure not going on your show because you don't deserve a favor from me. Not after crying for 34 hours like a little bitch, right? Who does that? 34 hours? You had to take 34 hours of your life to tell people all these things that I've done wrong and what a terrible person I am and how nobody should listen to me, right? Because I'm a sellout and all of it boils down to this. I'm a sellout. which basically means they're jealous because I've made money at this and they've made nothing in 8 years. And let's see, what is the other grievances? Oh, I've had guests on that they disagreed with me hosting. Well, you're free to have any guests on your show that you want, and I don't care what guests. I support your right to have any guest you want on your show. But instead of supporting my right to make those decisions, you're going to cry every week for 2 to 6 hours? Are we pumping up the level now? Because I know they're going to go do this right now tonight. There'll be another 2 hours about me. Maybe Thursday there'll be another 2 hours crying. Right? Anybody who has spent that much time crying about me is laughable. And if you don't think people are laughing at you, bro, those people that you think are your friends, do you know how two-faced some of those fucking people are? Because they're coming to me talking about what idiots you two boneheads are. But they're in your live chat, so you think that they're your buddies and they're supporting you. And forget about Cambion. Okay. And here's another thing. It's not about views. This isn't about views. We don't care about the views we get. Then you're doing it wrong. Because if you've been working on something for 8 years and you're only getting 10 or 15 live viewers, or 20 if you're lucky, then you're a failure. And I'm not going to apologize for not being a failure. I've been at this a little over a year, and I have lapped you 3 times, both in views and subscribers. So for you that's what this is about. Bitter, angry failures that can't stand somebody else doing better at it than they did. You have 2 choices here. You can either keep crying about me, or you can put your time into something more valuable. The choice is yours. I'm going to pray for you, and I forgive you. But I'm under no obligation to allow you into my life, and I won't. I've said it before. I will say it again. Anybody who stands in my way, anybody who shits all over all the effort that I put in here, I cut out of my life like a cancer, and you're never welcome back. Well, I'm going to say never. I have an old friend that occasionally he and I get in a big argument, and if he apologizes, we get over it. But yeah. So I don't know, friends. That's where we're at. And some of you on my Patreon know a little more about this situation, because I'm not going to put a lot of that drama out publicly, but for my closest supporters, I did explain a few things. And that's what it is, right? Roger Zimmerman says, yeah, total flavor waster. You shouldn't even respond, punch down. Well, he's coming in the live chat talking shit, Roger. So I kind of, at that point, there's some point that you have to respond. If somebody's in the live chat crying, then I will definitely, respond. But we're going to do what we can to, I suppose, cut that cancer out of my life. I'm not going to have people in my live chat talking smack like that, especially when they've been lying for 32 or 34. I don't know. We've lost track how many hours of the Critiquing Cambion show. And if that's what you got to do for views, bro, I feel sorry for you, because nobody cares that much about me. Nobody wants to hear 32 hours of somebody crying about me. But go ahead. Make some more. Make some more. Make some more, because I laugh every time I see it. Al Warrior with a kind and generous $5 super sticker. Thank you for your kindness, your generosity, and your support, Al Warrior. It is much, much appreciated. And thank you very much for helping us to praise the cash, friends. Praise.
You're watching Truthseekers. Praise the cash, praise the cash. Praise the cash, praise the cash, praise the cash. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your generosity. Praise the cash, praise the cash, praise the cash.
Here's what I want you to do. If the Lord is speaking to you, ushers, bring some baskets down. Just leave them there. I'm not finished. I got one more point to make. This is what I want you to do. Thank you, Miss Marguerite. I brought her because I want you to understand that the work must continue. This is not a plea for money, it's a plea for partnership so that we can be what we're supposed to be. I just need 497 people to say, I'll do 300.
I like being able to help others. I like being able to fulfill my dreams, and you know, it takes money to do what we're doing. That's why God gives you influence to help the world, to make it a better place. We don't ask for money, and people send in millions of dollars to help us keep the broadcast on the air. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a nice place to live and being blessed. And money should never be the focus of your life. If that's all you're doing, that's shallow. It should be to be a blessing to others.
I believe that you will agree with me when I say that in the last few months, and especially the last few weeks, that the anointing of the Holy Spirit on the telecast has been exceptional. The letters that we are receiving, the comments that you are giving us, but above all, it's just there. And we thank the Lord so much for it, because it is the anointing that breaks the yoke. It breaks that yoke asunder, whatever the yoke may be. I want to thank you also for the help that you gave us last week concerning the appeals that we made, how we are rejoicing. I wish I could give you a total now. I can't. I just can't. I don't have it yet. But I'm asking you, please. God spoke with a lot of you that did not respond. And we love you and we thank you, but when God speaks to you, I know he'll bless you if you will respond. And if you could send a gift of $50.
Raise the cash, raise the cash, raise the cash.
Funny you should mention that. Paul Cargo says, your son should get a view-based percentage. Me and my wife thought it was very comical that he asked for a raise because he's decided that I'm playing the clips of him a lot and I'm not giving him enough money, or I didn't give him enough money. We bought him some toys that he wanted to earn, teaching him about money. He shook me down for more money. So we're going to have to figure something out because I need him to make some new bumpers with me. We're going to work on that this week or next week. Yeah, he's shaking me down, Paul Cargo, for more money. He wants a raise, right? So, yeah, sorry to vent. I consider it a failure to even get upset over some of these people. But, I think that most people could, walk a mile in my shoes and imagine somebody making 32 hours of content crying about you on the internet. I mean, at a certain point, it is going to piss you off a little bit. Like, Jesus, 32 hours of this shit? This is crazy, right? And it is funny the number of people that are making fun of them, because I'm not the only one that realized just how many hours of their lives they've dedicated to me. And, there's some other little ankle biters, but those guys aren't quite as obsessive as these people. Whew, 32 hours. Yeah, and V saying the cash clown deserves 90% of it all. Yeah, maybe. Come on, V. Child labor laws and all, Yes. Blinken Liar says, don't watch it. Simple. Well, no, I don't. Well, generally I don't, but people are sending me, Blinken Liar, people are sending me timestamps with like, look at, these idiots said you said this. I watch every show. You never said that. And then I go to the timestamp and they did say that I said something I never said. Now they're psychics and they're telling people what I would do in hypothetical situations. Like they're some kind of expert on my psyche. And, it's just reached a point of ridiculousness. After all, 32 hours is definitely the point of ridiculousness, if you ask me. I mean, what could you accomplish with 32 hours of your life? You could do a lot of things, I would think, with that many hours of your life. Or you could cry about me because you're a failure and you don't like that I'm successful at what you failed at. And as for me, I learned a long time ago to celebrate others' success, because if they can do it, that means I can do it as well. Right? It means that I could do it. I'm a firm believer that if somebody else can accomplish something, they're no more special than me. They're no more talented than me. They're no more passionate than me. And if I'm as talented and passionate and dedicated as they were to reach their goals and do well at something, then I can do the same thing. And just kind of where I'm at, right? And, boy, I know I'd take some slings and arrows, but I didn't know it would come from former friends. There you go. The knives come out sometimes, the knives in the back. And, today I'm going to play us out with a song from The Dreaming. And in the song, he says, "What do you want from me? It's not even worth the fight." So most of me thinks, yeah, it's not even worth the fight. It's not even worth the energy to respond, right? But I suppose that's where I'm at. I'm gonna pray that some people get over their anger and jealousy issues and go do something more meaningful with their life than cry about me on the internet every week. Or I think maybe we're up to twice a week now, right? Maybe 3 times a week. Maybe they'll be doing 6 hours. Maybe they'll do 2 hours a day about me, 7 days a week. That'll be 14 hours of content a week. They can get out of crying and complaining about me. And then, of course, there's a few other ankle biters. But like I said, those guys only did one show and then they shut up for a while until I pissed them off again. And honestly, I'm going to try to not piss any people off, because this stuff is all a distraction to me. It doesn't do anything to help me in my goals and my cause, right? Yeah, and somebody's talking about their animal family only having 6 months to live. Poor on. Sorry to hear that. My wife's dog, which is a dog she had for like 15 years, died like a year or 2 ago. And that was really tough on her because, that was her dog, man. And it is like a member of the family going away. And then we had to explain it to our children, and that was rough, right? And that dog sort of died suddenly. It was really no notice. Just died one day. Yeah. So I want to thank my guest tonight, Robert Sheaffer. Glad to get him off of my list of guests. I made a huge list of guests when I first started my show, even when I first started the show before this, and I've gotten most of them. But Robert Sheaffer, I never knew exactly how to contact him. But thanks to Roger, a fellow show viewer here who put us in contact with one another, I want to thank him for making tonight possible. I also want to thank the audience for joining us tonight, because, boy, you always hear me say this, I'm always happy when there's an audience. And tonight we had a great one, much better numbers than than I expected. I can't thank you enough for coming here and being a part of the audience tonight. Always love it when I show up and there's an audience. Thank you so much for coming here tonight and being a part of mine. So until next time, friends, my name is Stephen Cambion. Please be sure to visit us tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be doing the Anjali update with a special panel show. And if you're interested in this story, I think there's going to be some stunning new revelations in the story that we're going to bring you exclusively here on Truthseekers. So until next time, friends, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all of you. Even you people crying about me for hours and hours and hours on the internet, I'll pray for you. I hope you get over your anger and your jealousy issues and do something much more meaningful with your time. Good night, and God bless all of you.